Just a second. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get rolling. And I also want to let you know that that Kim and I are like, we're presenting this, and we're going to kind of jump back and forth, but we're completely open to suggestions and ideas. And I think that even welcome that. Like, we would love to hear your thoughts and ideas, because it's still a work in progress, what we're creating. And actually, I think most things that I do are work in progress. So I don't know, you guys are probably like, you would like a finished product someday from me, maybe, I don't know. So anyway, to kind of start it off, I think several of you in here, I've been teaching and using storylines for probably like 3.5 years ish. And I kind of got my toes wet a little bit and slowly worked my way into it. And now this will be my second year of like full on, everything that I do is through stories, and I really enjoy it. I think that if Stan wasn't on here and he wasn't going to say it, which he did promptly, which was awesome, is that I do teach students, and I just happen to use biology. Is that I think using storylines is that really what I'm trying to create is just people that can go out in the world and think like scientists, critically, analytically, skeptically, whatever it is. And we happen to use biology as the vehicle to do that. And storylines allow me to put kids in that situation. And they're often very uncomfortable with it. It's not something that they're used to. It's something that they don't really want it. Like they don't want the drive. They don't want the steering wheel. And so sometimes it can be a little bit of a rough start, just trying to get kids in that mindset that, you know, we're gonna come up with some stuff. We're gonna be presented with some things. You're going to have to figure some stuff out. It's gonna be sloppy, messy. It's going to be difficult. You're not going to like the fact that I don't have answers for you. I'm going to make you say stuff and figure out things on your own. And I always tell kids, like, I don't care what you say, but I do care why you say it. And so we use a lot of, evidence-based claims in order for students to communicate. Is like, say what you want, but back it up with your data, your evidence. So this type of teaching has really allowed me to do that. So Kim, who's here with me today, she had a daughter in my class last year who got hit with this, and and a really bright student and works hard, but like a lot of my students kind of struggled with it early on, trying to kind of figure out how to model. How do you present your ideas and not use words? How can you explain something in a simple way? And so I think early on she was, experienced that frustration and that struggling that I think is important to learning. And then she went home and communicated that to her mom. And her mom, Kim, was like, yep, keep fighting through it, get through it. And she did, and she got through it, and began to really be able to communicate well, and get some cool ideas. And I think that kind of see that. And so anyway, so then Kim approached me and said, I'm really interested in this kind of the storylining process and what you're doing. And, I have some work that we're doing that I'd really like to possibly use this method and create storylines. So that's where we're at. Is then we came up with some stuff. I don't know, Kim, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, maybe just a little bit more of the backstory to what happened prior to our daughter being in Noah's freshman biology class that creates the foundation for how we started working on this in the first place. The applied agricultural sciences have seen a steep decline in young people pursuing careers in these fields over the past couple decades, to the point that it was and is a crisis situation. And horticulture is certainly among the disciplines that need new blood. So initiatives and research to understand and stabilize, if not reverse this trend, have been underway for some time. We know that one of the things that prevents kids' pursuit of horticulture as a career is that they don't know what the heck it is. Most of them haven't been exposed to it. And if they can define the word, they tend to associate it with only manual labor, like mowing lawns all day, every day. So the idea behind our project is to develop curriculum support materials that may make their way into high school science classrooms so that more young people are exposed to some of the cool aspects of horticulture that focus on cutting edge technology, like using lights to manipulate plant growth and robotics and artificial intelligence, for example. So the first thing that we did in our project is to survey high school science teachers, actually at a CATS camp, the Kansas Association of Teachers of Science camp. And we needed to gain an understanding of the barriers that you all have to adopting new content in your classrooms. Like, what are some of the things that keep you from adopting new components? And one of the things that we learned is that science teachers have the NGSS in mind, needing to match standards to classroom activities. So that led me to reading about phenomena and storylines, as it was all new to me as an old timer. And the idea was to connect horticulture to the NGSS so that they might fit in some biology classrooms. But let me just say there's an enormous gap between reading about teaching science with storylines and actually being able to produce classroom materials that would be useful to teachers along those lines. And so when our daughter came home talking about like watching a video about, animals in the African savanna at a watering hole, I'm like, oh man, I think they might be using storylines in her class and phenomena. And so by the time we got to her parent teacher conference, Noah was her advisory teacher. I was like, hey, so do you guys ever do anything with plants? And so that's kind of what started it. And as I've shared with Noah, it was really cool to see our daughter go from hating storylines and phenomena to, at the end of the school year, really loving the learning that she got to do with them. And this is also a chance to say, how important it is with the work that you guys do to teach biology, you're to really, use the opportunity to introduce your students to all different aspects of careers that could include biology, because they really just generally don't have any idea. And so just to leave you with that idea of like, how can I introduce conservation biologists and, all these different careers that can relate to the content that you teach, and interweave that into some of the phenomena and storylines that you do. So Noah, back to you.
Awesome. Okay. So, and I think too, just having a conversation and building this with Kim kind of made me think a little bit more about my role as a biology teacher and letting students see that world beyond the classroom. And so I always do at the end of every single question that we're working on, we do what did we do? What did we figure out? What do we do next? Right? Like we always have that conversation. Either at the end of a class period or the beginning of the class period, we're always talking about where we came from. Where do you think we should go next? And that's a spot where I can now, the other biology teachers and I would start to kind of incorporate and think about, okay, let's start slipping some careers in there. So that lesson that we just learned, like, what if a kid found it kind of intriguing, what could they do with it? And so starting to introduce that. All right, so let me introduce you to a couple storylines, and Kim and I'll just kind of go back and forth a little bit here. So these are two storylines. They're not finished products, still applying standards and things to them, but and they're also, I also want to say is that they're shorter than what you're probably used to in terms of, they're not a 6, 8, or 12-week unit like some of the storylines that are out there. They're pretty short, powerful storylines. But I can tell you that you could make them whatever you wanted to. If you wanted to get into photosynthesis and cellular respiration, like you could add that into these storylines. So there's a lot of standards you could hit with them. So I'll just kind of jump in and get started. So our storylines are just problems at the plant factory. And so we're going to start off by just introducing students to hydroponics and defining that word and talking about what that means. And so we came up, there's several different videos here that you can see kind of at the beginning to allow students to begin thinking about why this might be necessary. And, you know, in terms of climate and the conference that we're in right now, like this is pretty fitting, is how do we produce enough food for people, and what can we do about that? And so kind of getting things fired off like that. And it's pretty interesting. I don't think that students understand just how much food can be produced or is produced using these vertical farms and things like that. So it's really pretty cool. Even this one down here, why is the future farming in cities? Like, I think it's just definitely it's a phenomenon. Like, it gets students kind of intrigued and let them introduce them to something that's new and different that they probably have never experienced before. Anything else you want to say about that one, Kim?
I think the screen share is a little whack. Do you want?
Of course it is.
Do you want? I have a couple pictures of the phenomena.
Yep.
Do you want me to try to screen share and do that? Can I do that, Drew?
Noah's the host right now, so I think
awesome.
if you click the screen share options, it could say multiple participants share at once, and that allows everyone to.
That I have to do that?
I don't know. If you're the host right now, Drew, where you at? Yeah, Noah, I think because you're the host right now.
So what do I click?
Oh, no, we're good. Never mind. Sorry.
So yeah, that's okay. No, you go ahead and dive into the other one. And
okay. So I'm gonna have you stop sharing then, Kim.
Am I sharing?
I think so. Yes, you are.
Oh, great.
Okay.
Okay, am I sharing now?
Yes, you are.
Okay, well, let's take a quick look at these phenomena after all of that. So what we've built the storylines around are two light quality phenomena, which are anthocyanin content development and the occurrence of a physiological disorder in tomatoes. So with regard to plants coloring up, getting purple, they'll do that under high blue light. And in lettuce production industries, growers will actually dose high blue light at the end of the production cycle to get that purple leaf coloring. In the back of the classroom demo that we've been working on, we've got like a control light, a white light, a high blue light, and then a high red and far red light with different lettuce cultivars that really demonstrate this phenomena occurring. So there are lots of ways to build cool biology that meets the NGSS into this. And Noah noted that it's useful to have data sets and talk about, you know, how to design experiments. So this is some research that was published with horticulturists designing LED lighting recipes to optimize photosynthesis and yield and purpling and so forth. So with this experimental design, we generate this data set. And part of one of the storylines is handing this to students and having them interpret what it means across those different light spectra. Noah also noted that it can be interesting for students to hear from the researchers who did the work. And so I interviewed Dr. Meng, who as his PhD research actually did this type of work and has now started indoor ag lab at the University of Delaware. And so we've got three 5-ish minute clips of William talking about what the data means. So after the students have struggled with it or interpreted it, then they can hear from the researcher who did the work Another of the video or interviews is talking about how to design really good experiments with light, for example. And then the second of the phenomena is the occurrence of this funky physiological disorder called intumescence. And it actually occurs when there's no UVB light in particular. And so really cool cell growth that ultimately results in leaf death. These are some examples of what we can consistently create in the back of the classroom with, the artificial light demo. And so on the left there, you see like just a setup with the high red, the high blue, and then like a control light. And that allows in the back of the classroom, teachers and students to see these phenomena occur in live time. So we've tried to build, a couple of case studies around each of the two phenomena that fit into a lot of different ideas with regard to how we can incorporate a lot of different of the NGSS standards and so forth into introducing horticulture then as a career, kind of as an underlying theme of, not doing it overtly, but just saying, hey, if you think this is cool, here are ways that, we need people who have this knowledge and understanding to make a living. Okay.
Yeah, and so I think, when I think about, so these were kind of designed thinking about, horticulture and possibly a horticulture type class. But me as a biology teacher and think about what I'm doing, I'm always like trying to find those parallels and things like that. And so how many of you has anybody in here done the melanin storyline or messed around with melanin at all in terms of human evolution and things? Yeah. So what's really cool is that, when I've worked through the melanin storyline a couple times now, and just talking to students about just how cool like dark skin is in terms of just protection from UV radiation, and we talk about melanin production and things like that. The whole reason that the plant turns purple is because it's trying to protect itself, right, Kim? That's what it's doing. It's kind of like you getting a suntan. So the plant is like tanning to protect itself from the sun, right, or from UV radiation. And so like I'm just in my mind, I'm like, oh cool, like I can actually set up a parallel experiment in the back of the room and start messing around with UV radiation, and I don't have to worry about sunburning kids or anything like that. I can just simply sunburn plants, and we can. So for me, I'm already like getting excited because I'm like, cool, this is like a hands-on way for kids to actually see what's happening to cells and their reaction to it. And so that melanin piece and then bringing in the purple plants is really cool. So like when Kim talks about like the back of the classroom stuff, she's developed and set up some really cool kits that I believe if you're interested, then you can follow up the conversation with her. And what you saw when she showed the grow lights in the back of the classroom, that could be something she could provide to you. And I'll let her talk more about what's in the kits, but like really cool. So you could be working on one storyline and having another one going simultaneously. I don't know. We'll see. It might be like a whole bunch, but I get excited thinking about that stuff. And then like the intumescence piece, I think that just understanding how important different levels of UV radiation are in terms of just health. And so one of the other things that we learn in the melanin unit for human evolution is about folic acid and the importance of it. And so one of the reasons that we produce melanin is to protect our folic acid levels, right? And so, but just thinking about in plants, how important those levels are, and when they're not getting enough or getting too much, the effects of that. And so the intumescence piece could be really cool as well. So yeah, so Kim, how's that? Anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I'm glad you mentioned the kits because we do have 3 extra full kits, which are, the 3 different types of light. And then one thing about these these particular storylines is that you have to use specific genetics to get the results that we saw. So there are specific cultivars, for example, of tomato and lettuce that will produce these effects. And so we have kits that have the seed to do that, the substrate to do it, the fertilizer pre-weighed out that if you throw it on the plants, they're going to grow just fine. So 3 kits, and I'm going to put my email in the chat so you can reach out if you'd like to. And really what we're hoping is that if you have a kit, if you just give us some feedback so that we can make it better. We've got courses that we're putting together of the storylines for Canvas Commons, as well as getting this stuff posted. And every time we teach something, we can tweak it and make it better. And we need you guys to give us some feedback before we really, kind of get it out to the whole world, air quotes, so to speak. So,
yeah. And I also want to say too, is like, so we kind of fast forward in the terms of the storyline, one of the things we have students think about is like, if you're at a plant factory, is like, what variables can you control? And having students have that conversation about, the reason why you might want to grow plants indoors versus outdoors, and talk about a great conversation about variables and things. But one of the things is like just letting students like, okay, you think purple plants would be highly marketable. Like people might want purple plants. Maybe you live in Manhattan and purple plants are, desirable. I don't know. Maybe in Lawrence, they want a different color. Maybe, I don't know. So, but anyway, just having students like, okay, so you want a purple plant, like what variables are you going to mess with? And don't even say anything about light yet. Like let them think about like, I don't know, could we change the water? Could we change the fertilizer? Like, and letting students kind of come up with a design and letting them try to create a purple plant and see if you can get somebody in the classroom to do it. Like, I think it's just a really cool way to let students kind of play around with it. And things like that. And then like, I don't know, I'm kind of working reverse, like the intumescence piece, like you could say like, hey, sorry, here's this disease that just popped up. You don't want this anymore. What variables can you mess with to try to get rid of it? So maybe you start backward and you start with intumescence and here's this plant and now we don't want that. And so what are you going to do? How can you manipulate the variables and change? And so I don't know, I think it's just and like I mentioned earlier, they're relatively short storylines, but you could go as far as deep as you wanted to in terms of photosynthesis and cellular respiration, and you could add in and it could become a huge beast if you wanted to do that. I think all storylines have the potential to do that. You could use one storyline for the entire year and hit all of your standards because that's just the way science works. It's pretty interconnected. So yeah. So we have about time does go fast. We have like 4.5 minutes left. Like you have Kim here if you have questions. I mean, she's kind of the expert in terms of this stuff. So does anybody have any questions?
I'm just excited to learn more about it. Resources.
Sorry,
Yeah, I love these comments in the chat about other things you can do with the lettuce and other things that can be tied into it. And I think that's one of the really cool things about the storylines and showing students how everything is connected, right? And how there are all these connections between, I mean, with the melanin unit too, it's right, like mammals and plants, there's just evolving under our spectral radiation from natural sunlight and how plants and animals have evolved these really cool characteristics because of that.
And then I'll put these documents that I flashed up momentarily that have the storylines and they have the videos. I will put those in the Google folder that I saw that somebody shared with me a little bit ago. So you have access to them. And
they're still pretty rough. They're still pretty rough. We definitely need lots of input. Yeah. There's a question in the chat about the best way to connect with current researchers. In my case, the way I connected is that they're friends of mine. And in the case of the intumescence research, we did some of that here at K-State. And one of the current researchers is a former student, so it's really easy to reach out to him and get an interview. But yeah, that I think for the most part, researchers are, really eager to have an opportunity to get their ideas, into science classrooms. So an email is a great way to start.
Awesome. Anything else? I was looking through the chat as well. I guess you guys are gonna have to rock, paper, scissors tournament for the for a plant kit, for a back to the classroom kit. So
maybe we can make some regional partnerships between teachers that are in the same area, do sharing.
yeah.
If we could
Okay,
get
cool.
like a list even, because I know some of us already have bits and pieces. So if we could get a list of what's involved, we could maybe scrounge up our own stuff.
Oh yeah, there you go, Kim. Like just a list of materials, and then if teachers want to create their own.
I will email you the list in this document, Noah, and maybe you could put that in the box, the
Very
shared
cool.
Dropbox.
Yeah, sounds great.
Awesome. Did you guys have anything else? Thank you so much for presenting. That was awesome.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for all you do.
All right, so next we have Rachel Wall and Ashlyn Kite Harwich to present Kansas Green Schools and Environmental Ed Professional Development with KACEE, Kansas Association for Conservation and Environmental Education. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. It's good to see some familiar faces. Some folks I haven't seen in a while. Let's see. All right, Rachel, I'm going to go ahead. Let's see. Can I have screen sharing power? Oh, yes. Awesome. You guys are so good. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and get our Google Slides loaded up here real quick. Hopefully you all can see that. Can you see those? Awesome. Okay. Well, Rachel and I are really excited to be able to get to have the chance to hear what's going on with you all and share a few things that we're hoping might be some helpful resources. We know teaching climate change can be a complex topic, and so we're excited to have some things that are hopefully kind of ready to go that might be able to help you in teaching that in your classroom. So we're really excited to get to have a few minutes here to talk with you and share these. And as Jesse mentioned, we work for the Kansas Association for Conservation and Environmental Education, long name, but yes, that's us. And I'm sure some of you probably have heard of us. Like I said, I see some familiar faces. So we'll do a little bit of background, not too much, because I know a lot of you are familiar, but just a little in case some folks aren't familiar with us. Rachel, are you there?
Awesome. Yep.
Oh yeah,
awesome.
there you are. Okay,
I didn't want to be the jerk face that cut you off. So yes, I am here.
I was like, oh, I don't even see her. Where'd she go?
Yeah,
okay,
I
there
know.
she is.
Well, hi everybody. My name is Rachel Wally, and I'm the Kansas Green Schools coordinator for the state of Kansas. And I am coming to you live from my son's soccer game in Lawrence. So I'm sad that this went virtual, but convenient that I can do all things today. So anyway, it's nice to meet you guys. I have, like Ashlyn said, we love all of you and really support all the work that you do. And we're just happy to be able to be a part of today's virtual conference. So yeah, there we go.
Awesome. And as I said, I'm Ashlyn, been with KACEE for, oh my gosh, almost 14 years now. And usually I get to work with educators, with you folks to help you figure out how you can utilize the outdoors to teach your kids in and out of the classroom. And we're really excited about some new things that we have coming on the horizon. We've got a lot of new components. We used to do things completely face-to-face. And then for a number of years, we've done things hybrid where we did have online components and face-to-face. And now we've really jumped into this whole new world of completely online options for folks. So that's new for us. As Rachel, you'll probably hear Rachel and I say this this as we go throughout our slides here, but a lot of this is really, really hot off the press, brand new. So bear with us. We don't have all the perfect fine details lined out yet. So if we're sharing some stuff and you get a hold of us next week and you say, well, didn't you say it was this or that? And we go, well, that may have changed since then. Sorry. We're kind of still in the building phase, but we do have some things that are new and wanted to share with you. So we're excited for that as well.
Awesome. So for those of you who are familiar with KABT, we are the Kansas Association for Conservation and Environmental Education. And so we are a statewide nonprofit. And what we really love doing is getting students outside. I know I went to school for fisheries and wildlife biology, and like many of you probably had an awesome childhood of some sort of connection to being outdoors. And so we really love getting kids outside and using, nature as a potential tool for their learning. And so definitely connecting them to places they live. And then also what I really love is that, what we get to do is very, very science-based, hands-on, engaging. I love seeing all the great things you guys do because it just brings learning to life. And then also who we typically work with are our pre-service educators, which is really great being able to work with people before they're in the classroom, as well as our formal educators like yourselves, and then non-formal educators. So we love working with our partners across the state, zoos, nature centers, all the things. And so that's a little bit about KABT.
All right, so then we have a slide here that kind of compiles all of our little things that we want to be able to share with you. And so we've got kind of the short list here. And then as we go throughout, we'll talk about each one of these in more detail. But we do have a variety of different climate change activities and connections and resources for you. So we have the new is our EE courses and our EE credentials, which we'll talk more about here in a minute. And then some of you may be very familiar with the Kansas Green School program, as Rachel was mentioning. And we have a Kansas Green Schools Virtual Academy that's happening this fall. So we're excited to share about that with you. And then also, if you're familiar with some of our projects, Project WET has a new climate, water, and resilience guide or curriculum. And then Project Learning Tree has a carbon and climate e-unit that we're going to share a little bit with you as well. Okay, so first on the list are EE courses and EE credentials. This is our new baby that we are launching this fall. We're really excited about this. And without going into a ton of detail, I thought, well, we'll use the little graphic because it kind of explains it quickly. Our EE credentials are kind of our biggest piece where you spend the most hours working on something, and they're made up of EE courses, which are a little bit smaller. An EE credential would be somewhere in the world of like 40 hours of time spent doing work. And then EE courses would each be about 8 to 12 hours themselves. So the credentials are made up of courses, and then of course the courses are made up of smaller components called modules. So this whole new framework for us, we are able to offer Project Learning Tree, Project WET, Project Wild Aquatic, these environmental education guides that we have always had, but in this kind of new online courses and credentials format. And we're also able to offer our Green Schools program and diving into the investigations through this same framework as well. So I popped these up on the screen. I don't know how familiar you all might be. Oh yeah, I've seen these a million times. Yep, I know what they are. Or you might go, I've never seen these before. So I thought, well, I'll share them because you just never know where folks are. So these are the different guides I was mentioning: Project Learning Tree, Project WET, Project Wild, and Wild Aquatic. They each have a little bit of a different focus. Project Learning Tree is looking at these are all K through 12 activity guides. Project Learning Tree is looking at more ecosystems, natural resources, and forests and trees. Project WET is everything water quality, water conservation, anything related to water. Project Wild is all about terrestrial wildlife and habitat. And then Wild Aquatic is the same, but with an aquatic focus for that. And each of these guides, what's nice is the different national programs that have put these guides together have also compiled lists that say, here are the activities within these books that talk about climate change, and here's how they talk about climate change. So that's the nice thing, is it's weaved in to these materials. And these fall semester EE courses and credentials that we are launching right now have these programs as part of that training. So that's a kind of hopefully a great resource for you guys if you need some like ready-made, ready to go climate change activities. These have those for you. So I just put up there kind of some of the different courses that we're running this fall, and you can see the dates and the prices there. And then I did want to mention the bottom one that you see that has all of the different guides that you see: LEP, which is the Leopold Education Project, and then the Early Childhood. That's if you want to do the double course and get a full graduate credit, you can do all the programs plus a couple of the one or two of the others, and we can offer a graduate credit for that. And these are all online, all asynchronous courses.
All right. So with that, many of you are familiar with the Kansas Green Schools program, and that can get kind of confusing because a lot of people are more familiar with the Kansas Green Schools program and not as familiar with Casey. But actually, the Green Schools program is kind of a like we are the Green Schools program. So we're kind of the same thing. And right now it's pretty great because we have about 500 schools statewide that are a part of the Green Schools Network. And with climate change becoming, more front and center, our Green Schools program, we've definitely given it some serious updates where it's addressing those climate issues. And so so joining the network, you just go to kansasgreenschools.org, and anybody can be a part of the network. And when you're in the network, it's neat because it shows you a map of the state. And you can see other high schools that are nearby that are also doing, you can actually see what projects they're working on. You can connect with other teachers in the network. For example, if they're doing something you've always been interested in doing, you can lean on other schools and their expertise. And then there's also what's called, you can actually get recognition for your school. And so there's 5 different investigations that are student driven. With project-based learning, where they're actually the ones really collecting data, analyzing the data. They put together an action plan based on, what they learn. And then they're sharing that with the school and the community. And so the 5 investigations are energy, and that definitely has a part of that where they're analyzing their school's carbon footprint. Waste and recycling. I saw Noah was on here earlier, and his school rocked the waste and recycling investigation. And actually Manhattan was the first, not just green school, but they were the first green district where all the schools banded together and they all worked on a single investigation for a semester so they can compile that data and see what an impact the district was making. And then the other investigation is water. Healthy school environment looks at your indoor and outdoor air quality, chemical use, safety, all that. And then the learning community looks at your outdoor school grounds, such as school gardening. Maybe it looks at biodiversity on your school grounds. What kind of plants do you have growing? What kind of animal life do you have? How to increase that biodiversity. So that's pretty great. And when your school completes 2 investigations, you become a Kansas Green School of Excellence. And there's 3 different levels of recognition that you can achieve. So with that, actually, we are kicking off this semester. It's for middle school and high school teachers and their green leaders in their school. It kicks off, it's called the Kansas Green Schools Virtual Academy. And if you're interested in joining us, it's free. And it's really neat because, COVID has forced us all to get creative, right? And so now it's really neat because this semester, what we're all doing together is we actually all work as a team and we go through the waste and recycling investigation all together. So there's monthly Zoom meetings that you and your green leaders can join. Your green leaders are basically, those students who are really excited and they want to be a part of this. And so we actually break down the investigation into chunks. And so it's kind of like, okay, here's what we're focusing on this week, and their education is built into it. And then by the next meeting, it kind of gives you kind of those bullet points to get done. And so that's been really successful and we're really excited about it. You also have the opportunity, if you ever so choose, we have the brand new Green Leader micro-credential. So Ashlyn was talking about those micro-credentials at the beginning. And you can actually take the Green Leader course and pilot it for us. And so we're doing that for half price. And actually it's made for students too, where they can get an EE badge. And we're doing it free for students to pilot it for us. And you can also earn that optional graduate credit. So if you're interested in learning more, I believe we're going to kick it off around September 29th. And then we'll meet once a month through December, and we'll by the end have that done. And then in the spring, we're going to do the water investigation all together. And then also with that, speaking of water, Another resource that's available to you is there's a new guide that came out. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of Project WET, but WET stands for Water Education Today. And so WET is a national organization. And so we host Project WET in Kansas, and they have the new climate, water, and resilience training available. And so it's an online modular training. And this isn't available just for high school teachers. This is probably your upper elementary, middle school. So if you have any other educators that are interested, but water is predicted to be the primary way that we're going to feel the impact of climate change, whether that's water availability, human health, and food security. And so there's this modular training where you also get the resiliency guide, and it has some activities that are already developed for you as high school teachers. And I believe it's going to be about $30 or something like that. It's pretty inexpensive. So anyway, so that's what's going on in the climate and green schools life. So I'll kick it back to Ashlyn.
And then also wanted to mention here, last but not least, Project Learning Trees, KABT and Climate e-unit. This is a pretty cool piece. What they've done is they've compiled different activities that all are looking at different components of climate change. And it's really neat. They have it set up so that online, as it's walking you through the different components of the activity and doing these different things with the students, you can actually hover over the portion that you're on, and it will tell you, all right, this is meeting this performance expectation when you hover over it, and it literally has all of that coded out for you, or the cross-cutting concept, or the disciplinary core idea. It's got all of those things like embedded. So I wanted to be sure and share that with you. And if that's something that you're interested in, just reach out to us and we can get you connected up with that. It's all self-paced, so it's up to you. If you want to, you can actually, I believe, just download the guide, or you can download the guide and the actual training, which is really only about a 3-hour self-paced, but it just helps kind of get you more familiar with what's there and how to use it and some of the tools that are available to you. And I did want to mention, before I forget, when we were discussing the credentials and the courses, we forgot to mention that we do have coming up even further out on the horizon, but it's in motion. We're working with an organization called EcoRise to create a climate change and environmental justice EE course, which we're not sure at this point. It may evolve into being big enough to be a credential all on its own. We're not sure, but that will be coming up on the horizon as well. So I wanted to be sure to mention that. And like I was mentioning earlier, please reach out if you have a question, if we didn't, if we forgot something, or you're like, wait, what did you say about this or that? Or really, honestly, the other big part of Rachel and my job is to connect you with other folks who can help too, and help provide you with resources or places to take your kids for field studies, those kinds of things. That's a huge component of our job, is making those connections and setting you guys up, and really supporting you as educators in whatever capacity that we can. So please reach out to us. We're always happy to connect you up with other folks who are doing amazing things like you are. So, and thank you guys for having us and letting us have a few minutes to share and have some time with you.
Thank you both so much. I know I knew about Casey, but there's a lot of resources and opportunities that I didn't know about. So I think that's probably true for a few people here.
Before we let you go off to your soccer games and everything else, do you want to tell us about the Casey conference that's coming up soon?
Absolutely. It's going to be in November, and we went through the same thing. We were going to be, so we are also virtual. So we understand your pain of making this happen. So it's going to kick off Wednesday, November 3rd, and it will run through Friday, November 5th. And it kicks off in the afternoons, I think around like 2, but everything's going to be recorded. And we have networking nights in the evening. And then also, there is going to be a student track with that. And so students can also join, and there's going to be some opportunities for their learning as well. And so, yeah, more information, you just go to kc.org.
All right, up next we have Elizabeth Shepard-Lester. She's with Accelerated Schools of Overland Park. She's going to share her experience with the Kansas Corn Seed to STEM workshop this last summer.
All right, hi everybody. So yeah, my name is Liz Lusher, and I at Accelerated Schools of Overland Park, small private school We are about a block away from Shawnee Mission South, so if you know where that is, we're right there. We've got about, well, right now about 60 students between ages 11 and 21, because we're an alternative school, so we take those that otherwise don't fit into a traditional setting. So yeah, for 3 summers now, of course I didn't go in 2020. I don't even think it happened. But for 3 summers, I've done this Kansas Corn Seed to Stem. Some of you have probably done it. I know James is one of the educators for Kansas Corn, so I'm a little bit up in my head about having him on here. But to share it with you guys, the reason I am so fascinated and in love with this program is because this is all the lab supplies I had when I started. This one little drawer right here. I came in my first day in this classroom. I was sharing this classroom with another teacher. She taught chemistry, and this drawer, that picture on the screen, was all the lab supplies that the school owned. That and 2 microscopes. And I was about to actually come to the KABT conference that year, and the chemistry teacher that I shared the room with told me that labs were a waste of time. We didn't have enough time to teach labs. They're just a waste of time, and none of our kids are going to be scientists anyway. And I got personally offended by that and have made it my mission for the last 4 years to prove her wrong. So of course I needed supplies. So I started looking around for ways that I could get supplies without spending a whole lot of money. Like I said, we're a really small school. We're a private school. We don't have state funding, so we have to come up with all of our own funding opportunities. So I stumbled onto it. Resources. I needed some corn mash for a lab that I wanted to do with my students. So I found their website and found that I could request supplies. And that's really where my journey here started. So their website is kansascorn.com. It's really easy to remember. And right here, right here in the corner is how you get to all of their educator options. So the free resources that are available through Kansas Corn, they have an amazing lesson plan library. So this is the high school lesson plan library. And it's broken down by, of course, different topics. And they're really useful, just open and go labs. They do require quite a bit of equipment, some of them. But like I said, there's ways to get that equipment. They also have professional development opportunities. I'll tell you about some of them here in a minute. The supplies, you can request to have speakers come out and talk to your class or talk to them virtually, or you can even go on ethanol plant tours. So this picture on the side here, I actually took a group of seniors to the Garnett ethanol plant a couple of years ago, and Kansas Corn actually paid for that whole trip. They paid for my substitute. They paid all of it, and they'll even pay your buses or anything else you need. They paid our gas for our school van. So the summer workshops, like I said, I've gone 3 years now. It's 2 days of science. You go usually, because it's always a drive for me, I usually go the night before. They get a hotel room, and the next day you spend all day doing science. That night there is an amazing dinner. Usually it's barbecue at a local farm where you get to interact with people in the agriculture community. And then the next day you wrap up with a half day of labs, and then you go home with $500 or more worth of supplies. And so they pay for your hotel room, they pay for all your food that day, literally breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks. And then, like I said, you leave with $500 worth of supplies and this big book of all the lesson plans. This one's obviously well, use it a lot. All these lesson plans and all the supplies to do every lesson plan in here. It has really made a huge impact on my ability to teach science. So there's a couple of different levels here. They have a middle school 1.0 and a high school 1.0, and I've done both of these. In the middle school 1.0, you do in both of them, you do this distillation lab. So you make corn mash and you distill it into ethanol. And I know this conference this weekend is all about climate change. And I actually use this in my class to explain how ethanol fuels are carbon neutral versus our fossil fuels, which are, of course, pumping carbon up into the atmosphere that was put underground, so long ago. With ethanol, we're just recycling carbon that was just taken out of the air in the last 12 months. So I use the distillation lab when we talk about carbon in the environment. And then there's also in the high school 1.0 lab, you learn PGLO, which is genetically modifying yeast. Is it yeast or bacteria? I can't remember which. I think it's bacteria. So you get the PGLO lab to take with you back to your classroom, and your students can actually modify that bacteria with jellyfish DNA and make them glow in the dark. And I use that in my class. And when we talk about DNA, we actually make our own glow in the dark bacteria. And it's very similar to actually how they make insulin for diabetic people. And I have several students in my school that are on insulin that have diabetes. So they really take that one home and really personalize that lab. So I really like that lab too. The high school 2.0, which is the workshop I did this summer. I have not done the middle school 2.0, but the high school 2.0, we make biodiesel, which was really, really fascinating. It really takes that distillation lab up another notch. And then we also did PCR, which of course hits home right now because that's what the COVID test is. The COVID test is a PCR test. And one of the reasons I wanted to come and talk to you guys about this is because I had no idea you can actually borrow these PCR gel plates from Kansas Corn off their website. So if you want to do this lab and you don't have this stuff, you can actually borrow this. They'll ship it to you, you use it, and then you ship it back. If you live near one of these guys, they might even deliver it to you. So really an amazing resource that is definitely not being used enough. They said they only had like 2 requests last year for these. And then, like I said, you get $500 worth of supplies after the workshop. But you also get an opportunity for a $250 mini grant. So I showed you my supplies when I first started. So my first mini grant, I requested glassware. I needed beakers, I needed flasks. And so I submitted my request, and a couple of weeks later, I got an Amazon shipment to my house of just a bunch of beakers and glassware. It was fantastic. It was like Christmas. Breakout EDU kits. This is a new thing that they added this year. If you guys haven't used Breakout EDU, it's really, really fun. The kids really engage with it. It's like an escape room, but no doors are locked. You have a lockbox that has a prize in it that they're trying to get to. You can rent the PCR kits, and you can also request a couple of distillation kits depending on the size of your classes. And the distillation kits alone are, I can't remember how much, but a lot. So here, I just wanted to show you guys kind of what I'm talking about with the supplies. So I don't know how good that camera is, but here are some of the things I've gotten over the last couple of years from Kansas Corn. This is the distillation kit. It comes with the mantle and everything. And you learn how to use this and how to make ethanol. And then you light it on fire. The kids really, really enjoy that. And it comes with all of the supplies. And if you run out, you just send them an email and say, hey, I need more of this supply, and they send it to you. It's really amazing. These are the breakout EDU boxes, and they also gave us a 1-year membership to Breakout EDU, and it has all the locks and everything. And then all their supplies for all the smaller labs. And one important thing is this is not property of my school. This box actually has my name printed on the back of it. All of these supplies belong to me as an educator. So if I ever move to a different school, they can come with me. And they're my personal supplies, which I think is really, really nice. I feel, a lot of ownership here. This is the P-Glow lab, and like I said, they send me refills for this every year because it is perishable. I have to have, the bacteria samples. Irrigation kits for some labs, soil microbe test kits, all sorts of really engaging hands-on labs that my school would have no access to. That's really all I wanted to say. I just wanted to give everybody kind of an opportunity to see what's out there. Like I said, this is free. It's a really useful resource. Anybody have any questions? All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you so much, Liz. I'm super excited. I've heard about Kansas Corn for forever, and you showed me some things I didn't know, so I'm like more like driven to use more of it in my classes. Thank you. All right, next we have Kelly Cluthy at Crossroads Academy in Casey Mo. Sorry. She's going to talk about opportunities with the Kansas Herpetological Society.
All right. Hey, everyone. Let's see, just stuff all shared here. Yeah, like Jesse said, I'm Kelly Cluthy, and I'm just going to be sharing ways that you can get involved with the Kansas Herpetological Society. Obviously, you're here on a Saturday, so you know the importance of being involved in professional groups. And this is one of my favorites up here with KABT, and they also go hand in hand. There's a lot of overlap between members, and it's just a really great organization that focuses on some of our underappreciated animals in Kansas. So background here, like I mentioned during intros, I currently teach in the Missouri side of the metro, but I have been a Kansas teacher for most of my career in KCK and Olathe. And this has been something that I've been involved with for most of my career as well, with all of my students at every school I've been at. I just wanted to spend some time just talking a little bit about the organization itself, ways that you can get your students involved as well, and other resources that we have available that may be of use to you or your classroom. So just a little background information here. KHS is a nonprofit that's been around since the 70s, and it's not like other herpetology groups that focus on like captive breeding and animal sales. This is all just a research-based organization that focuses on our native reptiles and amphibians in Kansas. So there's a lot of scholarships around this kind of work. There's research opportunities. There's publications that we push out all about our native snakes and lizards and turtles and all that good stuff. We also have a conservation lens that we focus on. So here's our little climate change tie. This is something that where we are studying the basically these reptiles yearly over a lot of different surveys, and we can learn a lot about distribution and like life history of some of these really cool animals. It's also a link where we can connect public members to people who are actually doing herpetology as like a career path. We have membership options. Just our normal membership is $15 a year, or you can throw in an extra $5 that is a contribution membership that goes towards supporting grants and scholarships for student members. And if you join as a member, you get voting privileges, you receive copies of our society's publication and other publications that are co-sponsored by KHS. One of the things I always get out of this is working with local biologists. I've got contacts at just about every major university in Kansas now. So it's a really cool thing to be able to draw on as an educator. We have an annual meeting in November, and we also have 3 weekend field trips throughout the year where we actually go out into the field and survey just what's out there. So we're flipping a lot of rocks, we're setting up turtle traps, and we're just trying to collect as much information about what species are where within our state. We also have a really active Facebook page that you can get involved with as well, where people can ask questions or get identification help or talk about research. There's always a lot of really cool things happening on the page. So our annual meeting is in November. It just seems like there's always annual meetings there with Casey and us and or NABT. So this is more of a formal scientific conference. There's presentations by some pretty big names in herpetology, as well as chances for students to share their research. We have anyone from high school students to like graduate students who are sharing research. So it's really open to anyone who has an interest in studying these animals. There's also a lot of social aspects to this as well. We have a Saturday night social, there's a poster session, fundraising auctions, and it's always just a really good time. If you're interested in checking us out this year, as of now, we are planning to be in Pittsburgh, Kansas, but there is a possibility we are going to be online. So that's kind of, we're waiting and see as close as we can to the November date as we can. But you can get updates about this on the event page on Facebook. Here's just our group at one of our conferences pre-pandemic here. So it's a really great group of people that are really dedicated to just our snakes and lizards and all that good stuff. Kylie Sharp's in here, Eric Kessler. There's a lot of KABT people that are involved in this organization as well. Now here's where I really like to get my students involved. I like taking students out on the field trip aspect here, where we go out to a certain county within the state of Kansas. Often we're on private land that we otherwise would not have access to. And you can either camp or stay in lodging nearby. And basically you go out on Saturday and Sunday, you flip rocks, you're trying to catch, doing some road cruising, trying to find just anything you can and documenting it. Some of the species of interest go to museums. So students are actually participating in community science. I've had students who have found species that haven't been documented in the county before and have actually like had their name submitted to vouchers in museums and stuff. So it's really kind of cool that they are actually like doing real science and contributing to research. And the goal of these trips is to really figure out like distribution and abundance of our fauna, of our native species, as well as some of the introduced species that we're dealing with in the state as well. There are a couple of introduced lizard species and also snake species that we're trying to learn more about and trying to learn if it's more breeding population or if it's just continual introductions by people, and being involved in this helps us answer those scientific questions. You don't need to be a member of KHS to attend. Anyone's welcome to come out for the weekend and have fun with us. And if you are looking for something to do next weekend, our fall trip is going to be next weekend in Ellis County. So the link to the Facebook event page is here with some more information. But here are just some pictures of my students out on these trips. Oops. And it is just an absolute blast. Like, it's so hands-on. Kids are out there wrangling snakes and having campfires, and I don't know, it's just like it's one of the highlights for me every year as a teacher, is just seeing how much joy the students have on these trips and how much they learn and how much they get to appreciate just some of our scaly creatures that we have in our state that a lot of people don't really tend to care for. This is another teaser for next weekend's trip. We're going to be at the C2T Ranch in Ellis County, which is all rocky canyons and prairie along the Saline River. So it's going to be a really cool space to find some really neat animals. And if like snakes and stuff are not your thing, you're welcome to come out. And we have people join us that just want access to this land to look for birds or insects or plants and stuff too. So it's not just like herpetofauna, even though that's the focus. You can come out and hang out and just do what you're interested in as well. So I did want to spend just a few minutes talking about how to get students involved and just kind of my journey with this organization, because it does require a little bit of upfront work, especially if you have students from communities where maybe they don't have access to camping supplies. This is just kind of the logistics here for one of these trips. Typically, we leave on Fridays, either during the school day or right after school, depending on how far we're driving, and then we return on Sunday. So it's 2 nights of camping. I recommend, if you're interested, starting with a small group of students and finding at least one other adult to go with you. I'd usually rent like a passenger van that we fill with students, and then whoever else is chaperoning with me will drive another car with the camping supplies in it. If you're not into herps yourself, no one's forcing you to interact with them, so you can just come along and provide this opportunity for students. And you're also free to come check out one of these trips to get a feel for the weekend before bringing out a bunch of teenagers. I wish I did that before my first trip. It was super stressful coming out with students for my first time. So I recommend maybe trying to check it out, get the feel for it before diving in. Funding for the camp trips. I've been able to get camping supplies at every school I've been at through a combination of just like applying for little mini grants, little bits of money, a couple $100 here, a couple $100 there, really adds up. Or I've also had a lot of success on Donors Choose to get camping supplies. So I make sure our school is equipped with cooking equipment and some extra tents, sleeping bags, tarps, chairs to students who may not have their own. If students have these things, I do encourage them to bring their own. And there's usually a few that do have stuff that they can take with them. If you're able to get around $1,000 or so, that gets me just about everything I need for about a dozen students on one of these trips. At some of my previous schools, I didn't have students that had tents and stuff, but $1,000 got me enough where I was able to take out small groups of students and provide everything for them. I typically ask students to chip in a few bucks for food, and also bring about 50 bucks for them as for snacks, and sometimes we go to like restaurants and stuff. I always talk to admin about covering these costs for free reduced lunch students, and I've never had a principal say no to that. So this is something, again, based on your school demographics, you may need to get a little creative with, but typically admin are really supportive of an opportunity of like this to get students outside and doing real science. Before the trip, I usually have like a quick meeting with students and families to go over like the trip details, packing list. We talk about the weather forecast. Since we're going out in the fall and the spring in Kansas, I've been out there when it's snowing, and we've been out there when it's like almost 100 degrees. So sometimes you just never know what you're going to get. So making sure students are packing like clothes appropriately is kind of a big deal. We also figure out who's going to be doing what, or sleeping with who in the tents. And we also learn how to identify venomous snakes. So we're not going out there and just picking up copperheads and stuff. On Friday, this is our leaving school day. Typically we stop for dinner somewhere. I try to find like a local diner nearby where we're staying, and kids like eating at those kind of local places. We set up our campsite and then we might drive around, find snakes on the road once it gets dark. We typically have bonfires. I try to bring like a telescope and stuff and just get kids like excited to be outside for the weekend. Saturday, we make lunch, or we make our lunches. We just do sack lunches. We cook breakfast, and then we're out in the morning, herping, flipping rocks, looking for animals. We come back to our campsite for lunch and taking a little rest. Then we go back in the afternoon before coming back to our campsite for the evening, where we have dinner and a bonfire and just enjoy each other's company. And then Saturday is just packing up, heading home. Some people do stay out for another round of herping, but at this point, my students are usually so exhausted that they are ready to be back. And I am too at this point, to be honest. This is my trip proposal. So this is what I give to our school board. This is one from a couple of years ago where you can edit this however you might want with the information for the trips, but it has our itinerary that you can update. It has like funding on here. It has notes to parents about venomous species, and it also has a packing list. So you are welcome to do with this document whatever you want. It might be helpful. I actually got this from Eric Kessler before I start taking students out. So I'm passing it on to another generation of teachers. And then just other cool stuff that might be of interest here. This is the Kansas Herp Atlas. It has basically every single species in our state, and you can search for them by county. You can search for it by what group of animal you're looking at. You can try to learn like frog calls and stuff on here. So if you hear something, you can identify it that way. And this is just like such a great way to get to know your native species and help identify some of these animals. We have swag. I'm wearing one today. I don't know if you can really see this in person, but we always have like cool shirts that represent our native species. So right now you can rep the gopher snake or the tiger salamander. We're working on our designs for this year. They'll come out with our November conference, and they're super cool. So this is just a fun way to rep. We also have a herp count competition where you can use iNaturalist to log observations throughout the year. We have 2 age classes. We have an under 18 and an 18 plus, and we're offering prizes for the number of observations or the highest diversity within each age class. So if you're interested, this is a link to our iNaturalist competition page. Facebook group where I mentioned, super awesome way to get involved. And there's just, like, there's thousands of people in it. There's always something happening, lots of posts each day. It's a great way to stay involved. And here's what I really want for you. I know my time is about up, but Larry Miller, who is a retired Kansas science teacher, has made a very generous grant donation for KHS, specifically for Kansas teachers in memory of his wife who passed from cancer earlier this year. But we are trying to figure out how this money should be best spent, whether it should go towards like funding student research projects, or if it might be more useful for students to, or for schools to buy like camping supplies so they can attend these trips. So if you have any feedback, like if you wanted to get involved, but maybe money is a barrier, or if you want your students to do research and that would be helpful. Just if you can send me a message or whatever. We're just trying to get some teacher perspectives on how this money should be used. So yeah, that's it. If there's any questions or anything, I think my time is up, but I'll be here the rest of the afternoon.
Debbie had one question in the chat if you want to check that out.
Yeah. Teaching about herbivores. Is that the?
Oh, I think she just posted it. I don't know if Debbie wants to reiterate. I don't know if herbivores are herps.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Off the top of my head, this is my big like outing with students usually, but I'm sure people would love to check in with like resources and stuff for more specific. animal groups.
That's usually what I do is use the resources you suggested. But I was wondering if you had any other ideas for me to get them interested.
I mean, I always love participating in like community science, so it might just be worthwhile like searching what kind of projects are happening across our state. There's I know NOAA was really big into like the mosquito projects, and I'm sure other people can kind of chime in with some other ideas.
And I like the idea of the challenge that could get some of them involved. So
Yeah.
I'll try that too.
My Naturalist is great. You can set up your own competitions pretty easily.
Okay, thanks.
And there's even stuff like the fact that UVB light is, used for like bearded dragons, right? For homeowners. So there's like a connection between, light and herpetology there.
Yep.
So doing stuff like that in the back of the classroom even.
Awesome.
Our teacher here, she's actually brand new, just started with us, but she does something with the iNatural program lichen, and she helps to illustrate the lichen with iNaturalist.
Cool. Jesse's real big in like tardigrades too, so that's always a fun going on water bear hunts.
Yeah, they're the best.
Everyone's showing their tardigrades. Drew is having like a meltdown over here.
Drew, meet yourself.
Kelly,
Overrated.
KHS is being challenged, I think, because some years ago, and especially pushed by Larry Miller, that we have an official state reptile, okay? The thing is, zoologists have finally decided that turtles are not reptiles. They're turtles. And reptiles pee white stuff, and they have teeth. Turtles pee liquid stuff, and they don't have teeth. And there are a bunch of other reasons why finally turtles and crocodilians too have been separated out from the original or the earlier 5 major classes of vertebrates. So, challenge to anybody that's interested. What do we do with what's listed in Topeka as the official state reptile? Good luck.
Thank you so much, Kelly.
Anytime you have questions or whatever, feel free to contact me. I want to see more students and teachers out there on these trips.
I'm excited.
Awesome. So we're ready to move on to think about the Kansas K-12 Energy Benchmarking Program. So we're here with Kurt Foley, who's going to share some resources with us.
Yeah. So do y'all have my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I am here to share our K-12 Energy Benchmarking Program. But first, I'll tell you a little bit about our group. So we are the Kansas Energy Program. We're a group within the engineering extension at Kansas State University. So our program is made possible by our partnership with the Kansas Corporation Commission, their state energy office. They provide us funding to do all sorts of things across the state of Kansas. So we do K-12 education and outreach. Our biggest program that we're most well known for is probably the Kid Win Challenge. That's a competition where students from 4th grade to 12th grade build a small wind turbine that they test in our wind tunnels. And then we also test their knowledge on renewable energy and energy efficiency. And then ask them to present to a panel of judges, present their build, their design, and kind of their thinking. And then so our K-12 benchmarking is also part of our education and outreach. And then we have several different smaller activities that we can do just in a single day out at a K-12 school or something like that. So we also do small business support. So we'll do energy assessments at rural small businesses that are doing energy efficiency projects. And then we'll help them apply for grant funding to implement those projects. So we recently just passed $1 million in federal grant funding that has been awarded to rural small businesses. So that was a pretty cool milestone for us to be supporting small businesses like rural grocery stores that are really struggling and keeping those rural economies alive. So we also have a similar project where we do technical support for government facilities, like a K through 12 school or maybe a local government. And I'll talk a little bit more about that program as we go on. And the great thing about us is everything that we do is free. Our services, our time, the equipment library that we have that I'll talk about, all of that is free to loan out if you want to borrow something and do some activities in your class. So our benchmarking program is pretty new for us. We just launched it in 2020, in March 2020, which was just great timing on our part to line it up with COVID. So it was kind of a struggle, getting through the first year, and we're still working out some kinks, but it's been pretty fun so far. So we use Energy Star resources, primarily Portfolio Manager database. So we'll collect 12 months of energy data and building use details about the school and put those into Portfolio Manager. So when we talk about energy data, we mean, we want to get the electric bills and the natural gas bills. And then the building use details are really, the square footage of the facility and just kind of learning what operations are happening, what activities are going on in the school, because that helps us then calculate the energy baseline and the energy score. So Portfolio Manager will generate an energy score 1 to 100 that kind of evaluates the energy performance of the school and then compares it to similar facilities. So here is an example of some of the metrics that Portfolio Manager will provide us. So you see at the top, there's the Energy Star score. So this is the school that we're working with currently. So their score of 66 means that they are performing better than 60% of similar schools, which is pretty good. But you can see there's still room for improvement. So a score of 75 would qualify a school to apply for Energy Star certification. Much like our appliances, computers, dishwashers, those sorts of things can be Energy Star certified. So can our buildings. So we also like to track the EUI. So that is the energy use intensity. We primarily focus on the site EUI because that is, the energy that is being used at the school. So that's a measure of the amount of energy being used per square foot. We can also track the energy costs because when we're saving energy, we're also saving money. We're saving natural resources. We have a lot of impacts from just being energy efficient. So we can also track the greenhouse gas emissions, which is very important for climate change. Greenhouse gas emissions are one of the primary contributors to the current climate issue. And so having an understanding of the emissions that are coming from our energy use and how we can improve those just by being more energy efficient. So this is a graph I like to look at. The data is getting to be a little bit old now. It's from 2016. So in our fast changing world, things have already changed. But you can see here that energy accounts for about 73% of the greenhouse gas emissions globally. So there's a lot of room there to improve efficiency and to reduce the emissions. So if you looked at the current data, it would show you that transportation is actually in the lead, I guess, for greenhouse gas emissions. But primarily through this program, we're going to be focusing on improving our efficiency in energy use in buildings. So this is another fun energy flow chart that we use with students. This sparks a lot of different conversation. So on the left, we have, our different sources where we get our energy from, renewables to the fossil fuels that we use, and kind of where those sources are going to, whether they're to electricity generation, going to residential, commercial, industrial, or transportation. And as you'll see on the far right of this chart, we have our energy services and our rejected energy. So energy services is the energy that's actually being put to use. Rejected energy is energy that is not being put to use. So that is the waste heat coming from these different processes of us using energy. So if you calculated that, that's about 2/3 of the energy that we're generating is just not being used. It's going to waste. So that kind of highlights for us the importance of being energy efficient and understanding how just thinking about the technology that we're using, how can we upgrade our technology, how can we change our behavior to conserve energy, to be more energy efficient, and reduce the amount of natural resources we're consuming and the amount of pollution that we're putting into the atmosphere. So with this benchmarking project, we like to form an energy team of students, whether that's a class, a club, or just a group of students that is interested in energy. We like our energy team to be inclusive. Anyone who wants to learn about energy is welcome to. We do like to keep track or keep a smaller group, I guess, with this project, because we want everyone to be involved. We want everyone to have a role and be making a contribution to the team. So the team will measure and track the energy performance in Portfolio Manager. So we will enter that initial 12 months of data, and then we'll kind of hand that off to the energy team to take ownership of it. They'll continue entering the data from the school's utility bills and analyzing some of that information that Portfolio Manager gives us. And also in Portfolio Manager, we can set goals. So like that school with the score of 66, maybe we want to get that up to a 75, and that would make us eligible to apply for Energy Star certification. And so when we set those goals, Portfolio Manager will tell us, what our reduction in greenhouse gas emissions will be, how much energy we'll be saving per square foot, and also the cost, the financial savings. One of the great things about energy efficiency projects in schools particularly is that we can simultaneously reduce utility costs while making improvements to the student learning environment. Something like improved LED lighting, maybe an HVAC replacement that provides better comfort in the classrooms and better indoor air quality. And so we will work with the energy team to, sort of develop a plan of how we're going to improve energy efficiency in the school and what sorts of things we can do. So the energy team we really want them to understand why it's important, what the benefits are of being energy efficient. We want them to understand how energy is being used in their school. You can see in this pie chart here, there are really three major areas where energy is being consumed in schools. So those would be the areas where we'd want to look, because they would have the most potential for any energy savings. And so we'll also work with the energy team to identify different opportunities around the school, whether that be a behavior change or identifying equipment that could be upgraded. So goals that we have for the program, we obviously want them to understand and improve the energy efficiency. With that, we're going to be reducing energy use and the costs. And we want the energy team, once they've collected all this information, once they've learned about energy, how energy is being used in the school, we want them to showcase their findings, because it's important that we share with people what we're learning about energy efficiency, the impacts that we can have on our local community and globally. We want the students to build school pride, and we want the building to make the students proud too when they're coming there every day and spending so much time there. And it's also a lifelong learning opportunity for students, because energy isn't just used today or only in the school. We're using it everywhere all the time, and climate change isn't going away. So that's a problem that the young students today are going to be dealing with in the future, and we want them thinking about innovative solutions that can have a positive impact on our world. So we have worked to align not just the benchmarking program, but many of our activities that we do with the next generation science standards. I will say that in our group at the Kansas Energy Program, there are 4 of us. None of us are educators. We are all energy people who do energy education. So we do rely on our teacher partners to help us understand the best ways to incorporate some of these things into the classroom. And we really just try to stay flexible and meet our partners where they're at and really try to just fit in where we can. So the really cool part about this project and where the students have the most fun is getting to use our professional energy auditing equipment. So we have put together a couple of benchmarking kits of different equipment that we use on our own energy assessments that students will use to investigate energy use. So we have a list here of just some of the things. So an infrared camera is great for, anything relating to temperature. We have several different measuring devices, measuring wheel, rangefinder, a tape measure. We take all of those with us on our site visits, just because you never know. Sometimes it's easier to use a tape measure when you're measuring windows. It's great to have a wheel when you're walking the perimeter of a facility. And it's great to have a rangefinder when you're just measuring the square footage of a large room. And we also have a light meter. So there are lighting standards for schools. So we like to go around and just take measurements of the light levels and make sure we're getting the right amount of light in the right places. So I think the standard for just a general classroom in the K through 12 school is about 50-foot candles. And so we don't want to, underlight the room. We don't want to overlight the room. We want to do it just right. We also have a ballast checker, so that's useful when doing lighting inventories to make sure we have the most efficient technology in our lighting fixtures. And probably the most useful one that we've seen so far in this program is the data loggers. So I have can we see that? That is a light and occupancy data logger. So they're just real small devices that you can program on your computer and then just set it in a classroom and let it collect data. So this would track, if lights are left on in an empty classroom. And then so we can, download that data, import it to Excel, and then kind of do some, manipulations, build some graphs, make some charts, different things to help the students analyze that. And then we can also calculate, the energy costs of if we left the lights on for 30 minutes in an empty classroom, what would that cost? That cost isn't going to be a whole lot for one room for 30 minutes. But if we think about, what if everyone did that? So it's important to think about, even if it's just a minimal impact, if everyone was thinking about how they're using energy, how we can be more efficient, that could have a pretty widespread impact. If every school in Kansas was working to reduce their energy use and improve efficiency, that can have a pretty big impact. And so we also have an ultrasonic leak detector. So that's used, maybe in a compressed air system to find a leak, because those small leaks can go easily undetected, and they can rack up a lot of energy use and then a lot of utility costs that come along with that. And that's just wasted energy, wasted money. And so with that equipment, we will work with the students to do an energy treasure hunt around the school. So it's kind of like an energy audit, but it's more low level, where we're looking for low or no cost efficiency improvements. So that might be identifying, opportunity to improve lighting in LEDs. That would have some upfront costs, but it'd be relatively inexpensive compared to some other energy projects. Just placing some occupancy sensors like that data logger in rooms that are used infrequently, like a conference room or a restroom. Once one person leaves, if they leave the light on, we don't know when the next person is going to come in there to turn that off. Also with thermostats, if they're programmable, that is great. We can, set temperatures back when no one is in the school to make sure, our systems aren't running when no one is in there, especially because, during the summer, there's probably few activities going on, few people in the building. We don't want to be cooling the building if no one is in there. Also looking at the plug loads, there's a lot of things just plugged in, at a school. And even when those things aren't actively being used, they're still drawing a small amount of energy. We call that vampire energy. They're just sucking it as it's not being really in use. And we can also look for leaks around the doors and windows. We had one group that identified, an opportunity to just put some weather stripping on doors of their school. There was a pretty good gap, leading to the outdoors. So we're losing that conditioned air to the outside. One thing my mom always used to say is you're letting out all the bought air. We don't want to do that. We're paying to condition this air, to heat it or to cool it. We want to keep that inside where it's keeping us comfortable. So with this project, there's a lot of opportunity to do some cross-discipline, cross-cutting concepts. So with any energy project, there's going to be some math involved where we measure the impacts of energy efficient projects. We can calculate the energy savings. We can calculate the financial savings, the cost of the project. And then with those calculations that we do, we can evaluate them with our business knowledge, to see if this is a good project for the school. We can demonstrate the benefits of energy efficiency. We can calculate the simple payback. That's what we give to all of our clients that we work with who are small business owners. We tell them what the simple payback of their energy efficient project will be. We can do different cost benefit analyses, return on investment, and calculate the net present value of different projects. So there's also opportunity to express ourselves with our art skills. So some groups that we've worked with have just designed some flyers or posters and put them up around the school just as a reminder to hey, turn the lights off when you leave this room, or shut down your computer when you're done using it. Just small things that will make a contribution if we all can do them collectively. So also with that infrared camera, that's a pretty cool thing to just play around with. We can make different art on the walls, just putting our hands up on the wall and making different pictures, looking at that heat transfer from our own bodies to a different surface. And then the energy efficient colored lighting. There's all kinds of colored LED lights out there. I know I have some in my house that can be all kinds of colors, and you can also sync them up to music, which is just kind of cool how technology has evolved. So we also might get into some cryptology. So understanding the codes on equipment, these serial numbers, they're not just random letters and numbers, they have meaning. And we had one group that actually went around their school, took photos of all the air conditioners and HVAC systems that they had, and they looked up the serial number, found the age of manufacture, found the efficiency rating on those, and they cataloged it for the school. The school didn't know, how many systems they had. They didn't know the age of those systems or what their efficiency rating is. So that's valuable information for the school, because many of those systems were beyond 20 years. And really an HVAC system isn't going to last a lot more than 20 years. And at that point, you really want to switch to a different, newer system, because there will be a big efficiency gain there. And also with lighting, just those letters and numbers there, so that tells us it's a fluorescent light that's 96 inches, so it's 8 feet. It's a T12, so that's the diameter of the bulb. It's 12/8 of an inch, I believe, so it's an inch and a half. The CW stands for cool white, so that's the color temperature. And then it's a high output. And then the EG is just something specific to the manufacturer. But there's a lot of useful information in those codes and serial numbers. And so at the end of the project, we would like there to be an opportunity for public speaking. One of the groups that we worked with made a presentation to their Board of Education just about the things that they found. They did, different lighting inventory. They did that HVAC cataloging. And they just made some very simple recommendations to the school on ways they can be more energy efficient. I think in that school, there was one door in the gymnasium that was just open all day. Because students were walking out the gym into the weight room and back. And so there was just, all kinds of conditioned air escaping 24/7. And so, that's money going out the door for schools. And so we also want, students to just talk to their peers, talk to people in the community, talk to their parents, just doing something simple like buying some LED bulbs for your home can really make a difference in the energy use and in the utility costs. So here's some activities that we've done so far. And we're always open, to new ideas. We love it when our students, take ownership of the project and, have an idea, and we want to support them in pursuing those. So we'll conduct an energy audit at the school. We'll look at the different serial numbers and catalog those. We'll place different data loggers around the school. The light and occupancy ones are great. We also have some motor on off. We have some temperature and relative humidity, and some CO2 sensors as well that we can track, the indoor CO2 levels. We also had one group that kind of worked on an energy management plan for their school. So their school was actually pretty new and very efficient. But they developed a plan on how they could even make further improvements to that, which was pretty cool. And so really we want students, again, to have a lifelong learning experience here, because energy is everywhere. We're using it all the time, and we're going to be using it every day for the rest of our lives. So it's important that we're good stewards of how we're using energy efficiency, how we're using our natural resources, and making sure we're reducing the amount of pollution that we're putting out into the environment. So you could also, conduct a energy treasure hunt at home. You could find out your home's energy score, much like Portfolio Manager. They have one for residences. Talking to friends and neighbors, and just reminding people that when we're saving energy, we're saving money, we're saving resources, and we're reducing pollution. So if the students do identify some of the higher level, opportunities for improvements, maybe replacing an HVAC system or something, we are involved in this facility conservation improvement program. So that's a program administered by the Kansas Corporation Commission, and we provide, some technical oversight. So we would be, so this is a program available to K through 12 schools or to local governments, any government entity. So we would be on the side of the school. We would review the technical reports. We would attend meetings. We would, verify the calculations of the energy service company that is coming in to do the investment grade audit and make these different recommendations on how to improve efficiency. And there's also many utility incentives out there available to schools, businesses, and just individuals who want to make upgrades at their home. So we can help schools, look into some of those, get involved in the FCIP program if they choose. One school that we did work with in that program, it was a few years ago now, I think they saved about $80,000 a year in energy costs. Now, obviously, you have to be spending that much to save that much, but that's the kind of potential that is available. So with this program, we're going to be supporting students the whole way. We really want this to be a program driven by the students. We want them to take ownership over it and really drive it forward. But we're going to be supporting them with the benchmarking kit, training on how to review some of those utility bills and use Portfolio Manager. We'll provide training on the equipment. We can also facilitate some guest speakers. We had one group that was interested in, what if our school put in a solar array? What kind of impact would that have? So we could maybe invite a guest speaker out to talk about something like that. We could organize maybe a field trip. And we're always available for questions, brainstorming. We really love to come in person and work with the students, but we've done several meetings over Zoom or just exchanged emails. So here is our information if you'd like to contact us. I will say, all of that benchmarking equipment is available free of charge if you want to borrow it. And we have lots of other equipment as well. Unfortunately, we don't have it on our website, but that is something we're working on. But if there's any sort of energy related tool that you're curious about or might want to use, just contact us. We might have it. If we don't, we can look into getting it. But we really just try to support teachers and what they're doing. We'll deliver equipment to you. We'll come out to your school. This summer, we went and stayed 2 days out in Ulysses, Kansas, way out there in Southwest Kansas. So we'll go anywhere. So if you're, a teacher out in Western Kansas, please don't think that's an obstacle for us. KCC pays us for our travel and our time out there. So yeah, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer any.
I had one question for sure. Back when I was in Junction City, we had looked into Kansas Wind for Schools, which was, I think, a program at one point that would put a small wind turbine on your school property that you would get all kinds of data from about energy that's produced and kilowatt hours and monetary savings and stuff like that. Is that, do you know that if that's even still a thing, or is that something the Kansas Energy Program is involved in?
Yeah, so we were involved in that. The funding for that went away. There are still turbines out there that, we're trying to track them down to see if there are any that are still working, still communicating, with the technology. So yeah, if you are at a school that has one of those, we'd love to hear about it, see if it's still working or if there's a way we can get it working again. But yeah, we haven't been real involved in that recently just because the funding for that went away.
Okay. I am a person who does the Kansas, the KidWin program with my students every year. So if you haven't done that and you have an environmental science class or an engineering class or something, it's incredible. It's awesome.
It is a lot of fun. And with that, so we're planning 6 regional events for that. So those will take place next year in February and March. So if that's something you want to go to, we will compensate the school for the substitute stipend. We can try to cover any travel that you have to get to the competition because it is a full day event. And then so from each regional, we have a state competition in early April. We're still planning that one. So that'll be in early April in Topeka. And then winners from that will go on to the National KidWin Challenge, which I think is in Houston this year. So we've actually had a couple of teams won some awards last year, and then the Oxford Air Sharks a few years ago. They were the national winners, I think, for a couple of years. Yeah, so Kansas has been well represented in that. We're pretty proud of that. All righty. Well, if there's no other questions, just thank you to the KABT for keeping this going. It's too bad we couldn't meet in person, but thank you for your hard work. I'm sure it was stressful to get this going on short notice. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
If it is no big deal to everyone else, I think we should probably take a 10-minute break so you can go to the bathroom and get food and whatever else you might want to do. After that, we'll do a little sharing session that I'm going to call I Want It, You Got It, where I'm going to have you just propose things that you're interested in as far as resources go. And then if we have a resource or a document or an activity that we do, we'll be able to share that with each other for a few minutes before my session. So we'll kick back at 12:15. How's that? Okay. Okay. Jesse, do you want to introduce our next person?
I'd love to. So we have Drew Rising at Baldwin City High School. He's gonna share developing a cause and effect project-based unit for climate change.
I am putting a couple of links in our messages here, the chat function. There we go. This one is a data kind of like HyperDoc, and then above is the actual unit plan. Let me see if I can copy that, and then I'll paste it again. There we go. There's the unit plan again. So you can follow along with me there. I'll share this screen as we're going through it, but if you use those links, you should have the ability to edit the document. So we'll do some parts of it, we'll kind of modify the thing together. And then other things, if you find it could be useful for your class, I encourage you to make your own copy of it, personalize it for what you and your students need. And then I would love if you shared that back with me so I could make what I'm doing better as we go through some things. But let me share that. Perfect. Done. Admit. Okay. So for those of you who are experienced project-based learning facilitators, it's similar to this idea about educating within storylines, right? You have this driving question that you're going to use to sustain your students' inquiry throughout a challenging topic, right? Climate change is great for this, right? Because we want to find something that's relevant to students, that has lots and lots of ways for them to express their own kind of voice and choice within the project. And it's difficult, right? I mean, that's the thing with this is there shouldn't be just like an easy one-step answer to something. I've been through a couple of different project-based learning trainings with people from the Buck Institute, PBL Works. And the thing that stuck out to me the most was this social studies teacher who was a facilitator for one of our things. And she was talking about, there's this push to make everything project-based learning. And she actually teaches in a school that is considered to be project-based learning wall to wall. All classes all the time are kind of working in project-based learning, right? And she says that there are some of our standards, right, and we know this, that are just better for this type of thing, right? She teaches history, and so she says, you've got project-based learning standards, and then you've got the Irish potato famine, right? She knows that she can teach her students everything they need to know about the Irish potato famine in 10 minutes. And so it would not make a great project to force her kids to do project-based learning on the Irish potato famine, right? It's something that they're going to be tested on their state test. They have to know it, but it's something that they can do in 10 minutes. So to put them through a project-based learning unit on this would take time away from something that is much more robust and has a richer interaction with the different standards that they might teach. Climate change is one of those standards for us. It's great for project-based learning. It introduces things that work in biology and physical science and earth science, all of the cross-cutting concepts in the next generation science standards can be met within climate change. I think the issue that might arise for a lot of us is our comfort with the topic, because it can be seen as a controversial issue for some people, right? So as we're going through this, feel free to comment as we go. You can unmute yourself, make some statements and whatever else you might have to say, but does that match some of your experience, or at least the way that you think about climate change, right? That it can be a controversial topic to cover in your class? I saw a nod, so I'll go with it. Yeah, for me personally, I have had almost no questions about teaching evolution from students and parents throughout my entire 15 years of teaching. But I have had people kind of challenge the idea of climate change in my classroom, it was not something I was prepared for when I first started in teaching. And so this is kind of how I get into it. I provide almost no leading questions at the beginning, right? I give my students a graph. Here are 3 of these kind of graphics that I've used before. You can use more than one, you can use just one. And I just have them talk to each other. What do you notice about the graph? And they talk to each other about trends that they see and what the different axes are telling them, and units and everything else that could be in there. And so if I were to just walk in and say, we're talking about global warming today, or global climate change, or whatever it might be, that can get students in a frame of mind that could be one where they're looking to kind of challenge what you're talking about. But I have never once had a student fail to identify the trend in this graph. Would someone like to explicitly state for us the trend that they observe in the graph? No.
It's going up.
Good. It's going up. And so we talked then about what it is, right? And it is temperature. And it is measured in this thing called temperature anomaly. So then we get student questions. What's a temperature anomaly? What does that mean? And that's a thing that we can add into our kind of guiding questions that take us through to the thing. What else we notice? We notice that it says global average temperature. Okay, we notice that it's over a certain time range. Right? And so sometimes I'll do with just since the Industrial Revolution, right? That's this Berkeley graph on the left. Sometimes I'll go deeper. Sometimes I'll give them one like from Greenland ice sheets that goes back 700,000 years, right? And so then we can talk about how do you get temperature 500,000 years ago? How do you know what the temperature was? Okay, so more questions we can start to investigate together. But the one reason that I like to use kind of this since 1900 or since the Industrial Revolution, right, is that we have discrete measurements. You've got a thermometer. You can throw it out there. You can measure the temperature. You can record it. Okay. The error bars on these measurements, right, start to go away very fast. And then after 1900. Because the measurements are much more accurate. And so my students come to this conclusion. Okay, over time, the average global temperature is increasing. Another way that they can say that is the globe is warming. Okay, so then we come to this consensus that when we say global warming, we're not making any value judgment at that point, right? We're just looking at the measurement, right? The globe is warming. We have temperature data that we can come for this. And that's kind of the first step for me. This takes a class period, maybe 2, depending on how much time you have in your classes, how many questions your students want to ask, how many graphs you want them to go into. And then in my project, I would just assess this with a group discussion, whether it's us all checking in together, whether it's me going around to small groups and they've got a graph that they're doing like maybe a Kagan strategy where they're doing a round robin, right? Where they've got the document and they're all taking turns talking about something they notice on the graph as they go through it. And somebody else is kind of recording the statements and their ideas as they go through it, right? Good introduction. Again, you want the students as much as possible to be the ones that are kind of discovering, so to speak, the trends that are there, right? And you're just there to bounce questions back on them and think about kind of how their discussion is going to start to frame the rest of how you're going to go through this. Okay, but once we've come to this idea that we can say, okay, there's a global warming trend that's observed. The next question that students have is, okay, what's causing that to happen? Okay, and this is, if there is a controversy at all, this could be that place. Okay, and you can tell them as much as you want that there's a scientific consensus and 99 point whatever number you want to find percent of scientists in all of these different subject areas and fields of investigation all kind of agree about the most likely cause of this. But to me, I've always found that there's no harm in letting them investigate everything else, right? And so they might think, okay, well, the climate, if you look at that deep time graph, right, pre-human, as you're in there, it fluctuates a little bit, right? Sometimes it's warmer, sometimes it's cooler. So is this just part of that process where the Earth over time is cycles naturally? So then I would give them some sort of document just to organize their own research, right? Just to give them some sort of, you can think of it as a kind of a focus document, a graphic organizer, whatever you want to do. It could just be as simple as this table that I'm sharing right now. And we just go through and list all of the different things that could be a cause. Now, depending on how much time you have to this, like I'm teaching this right now in an environmental science class, or I will be teaching it. It's our next unit. So I can give days to this if I want to, right? If this is part of my biology 1 class, I might not have 3 or 4 days that I could give just to this activity. So to help my students in that way, we might do it as in a jigsaw, right? So this table group is going to look at solar cycles. This table group is going to look at the Earth orbit. This table group is going to look at anthropogenic causes. And the big thing to do is for them to first identify what needs to happen for that thing to cause a global warming trend, right? So changes in the Earth's orbit, you want to see increases in eccentricity so that there is colder winters and shorter summers, right? And that happens every 120,000 years or so. You get back to the different cycle in this, right? Sometimes you hear this called a Milankovitch cycle because of the scientists that kind of formulated this first hypothesis. And so then I had the students, after they look at how this could cause warming, what does the evidence show us, right? And so I'm going to switch my documents here. Do you see the climate change document now? It has the different causes, links. Okay. For my students, I would just give them something like this that has lots of different sources that they can explore. And then I would allow them to, if they want to find some more on their own, to use those too. But then they would have to go and see, okay, if I'm going to look at one of these sources, what does it tell me about what's actually happening right now, right? And what they'll find is that currently, according to this piece of possible climate causes, the Earth should actually be on a slight cooling trend, working its way back toward an ice age. So then they can say, does that match what we observe? Well, we've got a pretty steady increasing trend over the last couple hundred years. So then no, right? This is not a good model to explain, a good explanation to explain the model that we have, right? And I just have them go through each and every one of those possible causes that they can think of. Does it match the observed trend? And then for me, this is a great part in my project-based learning unit to have student reflection time. Like at the end of this, give my students time to think, okay, how does what I've learned match what I thought before? How does that make me feel? Because to ignore the students' thoughts and feelings in that way isn't great, right? Lots of brain research would tell us that that actually is going to cause them to have less acceptance of the material that way, just to let them express their thoughts and feelings at that point. And that would be kind of a between me and them writing thing. I might even let them just write it and not even share it with me if they want to, right? If I've developed enough trust with them that I can just say, hey, record your thoughts, share it with me. If you feel like sharing it with me, that's great. And then I would do kind of a class discussion. I could do this on Flipgrid, just have them do like a reflection video or a response video, just summarizing what they've learned across all of these things, right? What do they know now that they didn't know at the start of this kind of milestone event, right? And then we get from that into what I think is a really important piece of this, and that's formulating an argument, right? And that's kind of like my halfway point for this unit, is having my students get to that point that they can say, this is the most likely cause of climate change, right? And again, at this point, I have not done any sort of lecture or class presentation or whatever else, right? It's students finding this information on their own. So if you are concerned about potential, parent pushback or community pushback on things, because you're trying to indoctrinate your students, that's the thing that I've heard recently more than I've ever thought that I would hear before. I haven't done anything at this point, right? All of this is students discovering information on their own. I'm there to answer questions. I'm here to provide help with resources. I've not tried to keep anything from them. Everything is a possibility at this point, and they are discovering this information on their own. Right. My main job to this point is when I start to hear them talking about something that is a misrepresentation of the data, or if they're misinterpreting something, I can help start to guide them back in that way and say, okay, think about what you're saying here. And you've got this kind of logical fallacy where you're not considering this piece of it, right? And I'll point them back toward the data as much as possible as we're going through that part. And then you get into that last part, that kind of capstone here. And this is a great place for claim evidence reasoning. It's kind of written right into the standards for the kind of climate standards in our Kansas college and career readiness standards for science. And I always like to give my students at this point to communicate with the general audience. If you want to, you can say, write this as if you're communicating to a parent, person younger than you, an expert, right? So it depends on what you're trying to get your students, what level you're trying to get them to communicate at. I find it's important to give them lots of different kind of like frameworks to work in there, so that they sometimes have to work on conceptual understanding, and sometimes they have to be really, really focused on data if they're trying to communicate with somebody who is an expert in the field versus a general audience. And I just mix that up throughout this semester as we're going through some things. I have found that this helps with their kind of science communication, their science literacy skills, to be able to communicate understanding to a broad audience. I would have students do peer review at this point as they're going through some stuff. Give them a day to kind of write through their process, get into a small group of 2 or 3 students, and then give feedback on how that argument process is going. And for me, the key here is is the evidence you say is supporting your claim, is it the actual evidence you should be using? And then when you get into the reasoning portion, this is where my students always kind of get mixed up, is they kind of mix up what's evidence and what's reasoning, right? What interpretations am I making of the data versus what data am I using to draw those conclusions? So that's kind of where I go here. Okay. And if you want to, that could be the end of the unit, right? You could stop it right here. It could be a shorter project-based learning unit. It could take 5 class periods, kind of as presented, a day to introduce it, 2 days to do kind of a jigsaw and share out about possible climate change causes, and then give them 2 days to formulate their own claim evidence reasoning write-up of what's causing climate change, right? But all the cool stuff comes next, in my opinion, as a teacher. So cool, we've identified likely cause of climate change. I have yet to find a group who does not say that at least most of the current trend is caused by anthropogenic causes. I've had some students who've tried to argue that it's multiple causes, and as long as they're saying, logical things, then I kind of let that go. But even those students who try to say well, because we have more land mass in the Northern Hemisphere, it affects ocean currents, and that does have an effect on our global climate. The current trend is also mostly caused by what seems like greenhouse gas emissions and the greenhouse effect, right? And so I'm fine with that. That's perfectly fair way to interpret it, right? If it's a student that's trying to say well, there's increased solar activity and these sunspots are causing global warming. Well, data doesn't actually support that, and then we can work with that student. But again, I've had students who thought that that would be the answer before they started, and no one has ever ended up with that being the answer that they've tried to say. Here's where I want to talk about. I want us to work on this part together. Now that we know what's causing or likely causing climate change, what effect does that have? What is this? What's the consequence, right? And depending on your focus as a teacher and as a building is so rich, right? I read a paper as part of my, strangely enough, instructional technology master's degree on ecofeminism, talking about how all of the interpretations, even from this IPCC, right, are all driven in a way that that diminishes, I think is the fairest way to say it, diminishes almost every Southern Hemisphere culture, right? It's very focused on the Northern Hemisphere, right? And it just kind of ignores the impact that all of this stuff has on women who now have to, say, walk further to get water because that's the gender role that their culture has assigned to them in certain places. Or it's causing changes in what types of careers might be available for them. So we make this emphasis on education, and now all of a sudden the career fields that they're interested in are not available to them. And so it has this major impact on specifically women and women in Southern Hemisphere countries, more so than Northern Hemisphere countries. So you could focus it on that, right? It could be very driven by social justice and equity. If your school's really in, like I taught in Junction City, where it was a career academy campus. So how is this going to affect your given career academy that you're in? So I was in the ag and natural resources. So how's this going to affect farmers? How is this going to affect energy producers? How is this going to affect whatever, right? It's really, really rich. So what ideas do you have for different focuses for this activity?
Do you do anything about like finding solutions?
So we will, it's not part of this, but as we get into our sustainability unit, we focus more on that. I kind of separate climate from sustainability in that way. But yeah, it's certainly something that could fit in here. So solutions to climate change. What are some things that you might propose students look at in that way, if that's the focus?
I mean, I think it could be anything like personal choices to anything about like how do you get into holding lawmakers accountable, and just kind of talk about where the division needs to be on kind of like how much do individuals contribute versus large corporations or industries.
Totally. Yeah, that graph that was shared during the Kansas Energy Program part, right? It's the big slice of human stuff, but the slice that's actually things that an individual might contribute to is much smaller.
So I'm obviously very biased, but I think implications and consequences related to future food production.
Yes. And you could do that from different points of view. So you could do it as like this group is thinking about this for consumers, and this is the producers, and this, you could have a really robust look at it that way too. That's awesome. What other kind of like guiding questions might you ask students to think about if that was the focus of it?
See, this is why I need you guys to help understand how NGSS works. But you know, just things like you know, water is a huge piece.
Okay.
Temperature, and you know, temperature from the standpoint of you know, well, both phenotypic and genotypic responses.
The effect of the change in weather patterns on topsoil.
Yeah, just like where we're going to be able to grow food. And it's interesting to me that there are energy implications, because as we have to do more, say, controlled environment production, because we can no longer grow food outdoors, you know, what are energy trade-offs associated with that, for example?
Yes. Yeah. And so if you're thinking about, like, say that's just the focus that you want to have for the whole class, right? And each group could take a different approach to that, right? I can have a small group of kids looking just at that question about, okay, maybe we would just want to grow things in hydroponic greenhouses, right? What's that going to mean as far as like energy used to heat and cool those, water availability to keep that working all the time? That's awesome. Yeah. Really rich investigations can happen there. Anybody else think of one?
I was thinking of, it kind of goes with solutions, but on the other end of solutions, like carbon capturing techniques and things like that.
Okay. Carbon capture and sequestration.
I also think maybe like non-human animal impacts.
Okay.
Range changes.
Yeah, I think you could get into a lot of cool topics about like disease and protecting biodiversity and management of native habitats.
Yeah. I think that study out of K-State fits in there a little bit too. It's just kind of a unintended impact of increased carbon load, grasshopper and junk food on the prairie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even the spread of chytrid fungus up mountain ranges can be traced by climate change.
Mm-hmm.
Another interesting focus would be just the impacts on human health, the spread of diseases, and especially the lower socioeconomic parts of society.
Yeah. I've got a couple of exchange students this year, one from the north, like the Atlantic coast of Germany, and one from Finland. And so I'm actually really interested to see their perspective versus my students' perspective, to see kind of what they want to investigate within this topic.
Kind of connects to solutions, maybe even implications for food production, but just saw an article pop up on my feed the other day. Engineers have created the world's whitest paint that actually cools the environment that it coats compared to the exterior. So that's almost an engineering problem or event that you could get into with kids. Like, how can you cool without using the typical methods that we're used to.
Just like high albedo paint.
Pretty much, but even like white paint, in the article it said it doesn't necessarily cool the inside of the environment compared to the exterior. But whatever they did with this paint, and they get into it a little bit, allows the interior temperature to be cooler.
Wow.
That was really cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, so that's, different ways that you can take this. So you can leave it wholly open to your students. If that's kind of your style. I'm more of that kind of person. Like, what's your passion within this thing? What do you want to investigate deeper in this place? But especially as you're first starting, if you want to take something like this, implications and consequences on food production, and we're kind of all driven toward that one kind of overarching goal, and let them investigate different questions underneath it, I think that is definitely a choice that you can get into there. And then at the end, I mean, this is the part that makes it project-based learning versus just a cool project, right? Is how do we make our knowledge public? How do we share what we learn with other people? You could do a little poster session. You could have them make little videos. There's a number of cool ideas that we can talk about. If you are interested in this kind of thing, let me know. Connect with me on Twitter or email or wherever we might be able to connect, and we can brainstorm some stuff together as we're going through it. Any final questions or comments you have about this project or something similar to it? Debbie, I can share a link to a folder that will have more stuff than you'll probably want to look at, for sure. And then I'll do the edited version, the condensed version in my brain. I'll go through and put that in the folder for the actual conference for my session that has the edited version of my thoughts. Okay, I will turn it over to actually our president is with us now, Kelly Toole. And she has produced a video for us. Do you want to introduce your video for us, Kelly?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Uh-huh.
Okay, excellent. I want to see first if, since I just got on, is Larry was hoping to join in. He has house guests, so if he didn't know I was going to give him the award. So when I initially asked him to join us, he said he was unable, and I said, well, maybe I could come out and visit you so I could at least get a video. And so I think since now he knows the secret is out, he was going to try to join us. So I don't know if we want to wait a few minutes and see if he'll join us. I just walked in the door, so I grabbed some lunch and I was going to head up to my office. I can tell you're with your devious smile, Drew, that you were like,
How inconvenient can I make this?
Let's see. That's so funny. Yeah. So I since I'm just joining you all, I'm sorry I couldn't be there earlier since I was at a funeral. But if have you guys had a break in recent? Maybe take a 5-minute break. I don't know. What do you?
We can. We just had one at 12 to 12:15. We took a short break.
Okay.
But we can if we need to. Larry's
I just
not
want to
with
give
us,
him
right?
the opportunity. Yeah, since I'd like to give him the opportunity.
Okay.
He was going to try to hop on.
Do you and Jesse want to start sharing your thing? And when he joins us, we can either pause or we can.
Yeah.
do it at the
So
end.
I was just going to listen in on you guys until I just grabbed a bite. I need to go upstairs. So let's do a 5-minute break just so I can get situated. But I had you in my ear. So then I knew you were talking about me. So I ran over to the computer that I had just booted up to unmute. Yeah. Yeah. So is that all right? 5-minute break, come back at 10:10 and we can do our presentation. Larry might join in there at the end, and then Jesse and I can get started and hopefully get everybody wrapped up a few minutes early on this lovely afternoon.
Sure thing.
Awesome. Okay, see you all in 5 minutes. Thank you.
All right. President Toole,
That sounds so official.
you're back.
Excellent. Excellent. And do you have the video queued up, Drew?
I do.
Okay. Yeah. If you don't mind sharing that, and I'll get it introduced. So in recent years, we've started a new tradition with KABT for the president to bequeath the President's Award on someone that had an impact on the president. And so I chose Larry Miller, and we have a 10-minute interview or share out when I went to his house and surprised him. He knew I was coming. I said I had something to drop off. Turns out it was an award. And so we visited for 3 hours, and he has this beautiful property. His dog is nudging me, so I'm not scratching anything inappropriate during the video, so that you know. So his dog's in my lap. It was just wonderful to visit with Larry and hear just little snippets about what's influenced him, a teacher that influenced him, and then he shared a few thoughts at the end by Facebook when I gave him the edited clip, and he has some closing thoughts that I'll share orally after the video. So take it away, or hit go for me, Drew. Thank you so much for having that ready to go.
Will do.
Well, hello, folks at home. I'm here in the Wakarusa River Valley with Larry Miller, who's my friend that I met through KHS, the Kansas Herpetological Society, and I have long admired your scientific knowledge, and I know I had read one of your Facebook posts about the importance of documentation and accurate facts, and so I've long admired your participation in the scientific community with the Herpetological Society, and I don't know if everybody knows that you and your students are the reason that we have a state reptile, the ornate box turtle, and that was what, spring?
1986, 85, 86 school year.
With the kids you taught
That time
middle school?
Right, that time I was teaching just 5th and 6th grade sciences in Caldwell, Kansas. And we were told that we needed to put together something for the 125th anniversary for the Kansas statehood in 1986. And my students decided they wanted to go for a new state symbol. We discussed several, state fish. We discussed basically state fish and state reptile, because they've been talked about before. It came down to the bull snake or the ornate box turtle.
Oh, hey, I didn't know that.
The bull snake probably had almost as much support in the classroom as the box turtle. We kept one. However, some of the parents had mentioned to their children that a lot of people didn't like snakes, so we might have a better chance with the box turtle.
To getting it pushed
to get
through.
It through. And of course, that was at a time before that a lot of DNA work was being done, and now there's no question whether box turtles are a completely different class of their own anyway. But that's a long story. Anyway.
That's neat.
That's how it started.
Oh, awesome. And then I don't know if you want to talk about things maybe you've done with KABT or KHS as well, okay, because your work within the scientific community, I think, is so impressive.
Kansas Herp Society was formed in 1974. Basically, an idea of several herpetologists in Lawrence, Joe Collins being the main one. And I was teaching in Caldwell at that time. I just started teaching in 1971 and 72. I'll be honest, at that time, I did not know, bug trying to get me there. I did not know how to identify a lot of the amphibious reptiles in Kansas. My background was in natural sciences. I have lots of courses in science, but I've not majored in biology or herpetology. And kids were bringing all these snakes, and I was getting some. I could identify a lot, and I could tell if they're venomous or not, but that was about it. And in 1974, when the first edition of Amphibians and Reptiles in Kansas came out, which was the author, and someone mentioned I should get that book. I did, and it was very helpful, but I still couldn't identify everything. So I did not idea who Joe Collins was at the time. He went by Tom Collins at that time. And so what happened was I took photos of several of them. The snakes I wasn't sure of, and I sent them to Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks, which was the Kansas Fish and Game Commission at that time. one of the people there sent them back to me and sent me a letter saying that I needed to send him to Tom Collins at the University of Kansas because he was the expert.
Oh, that's awesome.
Gave me his address. So I sent him to Joe, or Tom then, and Joe identified him, wrote me and said that there was a new society being formed, the Kansas Herpetological Society, and said, gosh, he said, we could use some members from that part of the state. He said, would you be interested? So I joined.
That's great.
First field trip was in Kingman County the following spring, 1975. Joe and I hit it off, and between 1975 and when he passed in 2012, we had traveled basically, we'd pretty much been to every county in Kansas, or he'd been to all of them. I'd been to most of them with him. We'd been to Arizona.
Did anyone else? Yeah, sound cut out. I can try to broadcast from my end. Oh, there, it's back.
And Joe was.
I'll get mine queued up just in case.
If you look at his book on amphibians and reptiles in Kansas, the latest one being amphibians, reptiles, and turtles in Kansas, and look at the credits, he has page after page of credits.
That's awesome.
There is at minimum 100 of those people that were students of mine in Colorado, Kansas at the time.
Wow, that's great.
Not counting the number that were students from around Topeka after I moved to Topeka.
I bet they were so excited to
See
be
your name
acknowledged.
in print. So if
Wow.
they did something of any kind of scientific significance or even attended a field trip, Joe gave them credit. So that was something I learned, and learned about documentation as well, that you don't guess at things with any of them. So I started taking the elementary education courses, which I thought I wanted to teach elementary school or middle school, really, or junior high at that time. And my professor was a gentleman by the name of Ed Foster, who just passed away about a year ago. He was by far the best instructor I ever had in college, or probably anywhere. He knew how to work with students. He loved students. He loved the people he worked with, whether they were going to be a teacher in New York City or stay here in Kansas. And he did a variety of things. Actually, one of the things that got me interested to begin with in his classes, Max, wish he wouldn't do that, and was he taught aerospace education courses, and I got to go to Florida with him in January before our moon landing that following deal, and go through all of the things at the Cape. But he also loved wildlife. He loved nature. And being an elementary ed, I was one of a very few people. I shouldn't say few people. I was one of the very few males in the class. Most were female.
Right.
And which was an advantage back then, because schools were looking for men, and there weren't a lot in elementary ed. I remember one day in class, I was my junior year, and he walks in and pulls out a prairie king snake out of a bag. And he said, how many of you in here have ever, or how many of you are afraid of snakes? There were really not all that many hands went up, but there were quite a few. And then he said, well, how many of you really understand snakes and can identify snakes? I sure didn't put my hand up. There's a lot I knew I couldn't. And he said, well, how many of you think you'll be teaching in Kansas? And about half of us put our hands up. He says, I'll make a prediction. He said, I predict that within the first week of school, one of your students will bring in a snake, walk up to you and say, what is it? And how you respond will determine what your school year will be like. And then he started talking about snakes, and we all end up having this king snake and everything.
That's awesome.
My first week of school in Caldwell, and it probably been maybe the third or fourth day, this young man was teaching sixth grade, fifth sixth grade. The sixth grader walks in the morning, and I could tell something was strange right before school. So he had a big coffee can, and he's smiling, and all the other students are around him. And he walks up, and I said, well, what can I do for you? Because this actually before school started. He says, Mr. Miller, what is this? He opened the can and pulled out a fairly large prairie king snake.
Oh my gosh.
One of the few I could still identify.
Thank goodness.
And I looked, I said, oh, that's a prairie king snake, and I hold it. And
Was he trying to make you
I
nervous
think
that we
I
brought it
really
in to be
think
a
that
little
was
stinker?
probably it. He did not. He thought it was a bull snake. He actually didn't know for sure what he had, but he knew it wasn't dangerous.
Awesome.
And I really believe that made a lot, had a lot to do with that first teaching. Of course, after that, everybody was bringing it.
Oh, right. Well, I have an award to present you. So this is the President's Award from the Kansas Association of Biology Teachers, and it's given by at discretion by the president. So because I so admire you and I think you said it perfectly when you said that if the teacher's excited, the students will be excited, and so just how you've inspired me as a teacher and connection with nature and your just giving nature, and it's just I really enjoy you. So this is given to Larry Miller in honor of the President's Award for a lifetime of service to teaching, science, and community. So that is for you.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
There's so many outstanding teachers out there, and in fact, I could name a few that were former students that I'm.
Which is amazing how the impact you've had.
Is something that whether it was me or some other teacher, I don't know, but they're doing a wonderful job as well. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
Thank you so much.
And what I didn't say was this is the tradition is to have the GPS coordinates of where this wood was collected. And so I have been on a mission because I've known I wanted to give this to you for the last year. So I've been on a mission to find a chunk of wood from this area.
Oh, wow.
Thanks to the Fab Lab and Keith Manbeck, who's a teacher at my school, who created that for us.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Of course.
So I don't think that this made it into that cut, but at some point, which completely cracks me up and doesn't surprise me in the least, I know that Larry name dropped Stan Roth at some point when we were chatting about adventures you all have been on together too, which is fantastic. So Larry wanted to make sure that I knew that, and that I shared with all of you all, how much he appreciated KABT and all that it has done for him over the years, and all the learning he's done from other KABT members to make him a better teacher. So yay, Larry. I adore him. So thank you guys for listening to that. Yeah. Fantastic. All right, I think we're ready for the next phase of our presentation. Let me go ahead and get my slides shared, and then Jesse's going to get us started off.
Yeah, if you've ever hung out with Kelly Toole long enough, she always has the best stories when we have like biology teacher gets-togethers. And so, yeah, cow farts are one of those. So I think Kelly and I both were first introduced to storylines through Noah and Robert. Thank you very much. And yeah, Kelly's been talking about this cow fart storyline. So I was lucky enough to be able to kind of trial run this in my classroom. And I think Chris Oleg and I both tried to help a little bit, but thank you, Kelly. This is an amazing, fun, educational thing for us to do in our classroom. So cow farts and global warming, what a gas. This was really great.
Oh, you're so funny.
For all the jokes that we were able to have. So I love that Kelly named our session Kel and Jesse Fart Around. So I had to include
when we were practicing our presentation. You're funny for putting that on there. So I had, I teach a veterinary medicine course for juniors and seniors in high school, and I've taught digestion and comparative anatomy, and we get into fermentation, and it's just really boring, and it's sad because it shouldn't be. So I considered doing a Nearpod with the different components that I was wanting to pull in, but after we learned about storylines from Noah and Robert, it was like, this is perfect, this is fantastic. And I attended a virtual workshop this summer from On the Farm STEM, and if you look at the resource there at the bottom, they actually have a course that's self-paced. It took me, I think, about an hour because I had already attended Noah and Robert's explanation of storylines. So it took me about an hour just to work through and read, but I liked that I could go back and reread portions of it. So if you are interested in getting started with storylines, there's other sources out there. Those are all written in our CalFART storyline document that we'll share with you in a little bit. But this is the one that I use their language in areas of the document. So if you're interested, you go to resources and then in courses, getting started with storylines, and it's all free.
So I think this, Kelly, is this your both first time doing a storyline? I know it's mine.
Yes, yes. And we'll do some feedback at the end and some student feedback to tell you what we liked on it. But just in general, this was such a better way for teaching of all of these concepts together. It was great.
For sure. And there's so much to storylining, and it's taken a few years of hearing Noah and Robert and others talk about storylining to really kind of get it. For me personally, I'm a slow learner.
Just rip the Band-Aid off. Y'all just got to just try it because it's so much fun.
It's been fantastic, and I wish I would have been doing this sooner. But we're not going to be able to go in depth in all the different parts of storylining. We're just going to kind of go through ours. So the first step is anchoring phenomena. So we would have our students, we play these students for a video, play these videos for our students, and then have them state things that they noticed and that they wondered. So, and questions they have. So we're going to play this for you guys. And
this always happens.
As those, put your student hat on and think about what questions might come up with these.
I didn't click the button. Okay, now we're ready. I didn't click the share the sound button because then it's really, would be really, let's see. It didn't pop up, did it? You can tell I was totally effective at teaching hybrid. It was pretty incredible how good that went. All right. So the idea is just to get something engaging to suck the students in and getting them asking questions.
You get a bunch of cows together and it's moo, moo, moo. And the next thing you know, boom, they raise the roof. Howdy heifers, this is D News. I'm Trace. Dateline January 27th, 2014. A barn in Rasdorf, Germany containing 90 cows was rocked by an explosion, and a buildup of methane gas was the culprit. The roof was damaged and at least one cow needed to be treated for burns. A static charge produced by a cow massaging machine set off the methane explosion, leading this reporter to ask, what the heck is a cow massaging machine? And how can methane cause such a big explosion? First, cows produce a lot of methane. You've probably heard that it can be more damaging than CO2. The planet has 1.5 billion cows, and they emit methane as they digest their food in their 4 stomachs. The bacteria living within cows help them break down the grass, but create methane, ammonia, and other gases in the process. Estimates vary, but experts believe a single cow can produce approximately 100 to 500 liters of methane per day, or about as much pollution as the average car. You might associate methane gas with fart smell, but you'd be wrong. Methane is odorless, colorless, it's lighter than air, and it's flammable. Industry adds sulfur smell to help identify gas leaks, but with cow farts, I mean, they already kind of smell. Anyway, with 90 cows in a barn, their butts could produce as much as 45,000 liters of methane in a day. That gas would then float to the top of the barn, especially if the barn didn't have proper ventilation. By some estimates, methane gas is combustible at concentrations as little as 5%. So without knowing the size of the barn, I can't really tell you much more than that, but hey, the boom happened, we know. Explosions like this happen more often than you'd think. Methane is suspected to have caused an explosion earlier this year at a wastewater treatment plant, last August in a Mexico office building, and inside a New Zealand mine in 2010. This is by far, however, the stinkiest, though at least no one was hurt. Coal miners have to worry about methane too. Rocks contain 100 to 600 cubic feet of methane for every ton of coal being mined. Being lighter than air, but trapped in a mine shaft, means the methane displaces that air and can cause suffocation. It's real dangerous, y'all. But it can also be useful. Aside from blowing up German barns, methane is used as a fuel to create heat and light in homes and commercial buildings. And then on a larger scale, methane can be used to generate electricity. 87% of natural gas is methane. It's also used to make industrial chemicals and in the garment, automotive, and plastics industries. Most farmers have specialized barns that stop methane buildup by letting it float up into the atmosphere out of the barn. But more enterprising and environmentally conscious animal farmers capture methane to sell as energy. So, though it can be considered environmentally harmful, it can blow up a barn. It's not entirely useless. It's actually a rather valuable gas when used properly. So, are you worried about cow farts destroying the planet? Tell us what you think, and thanks a lot for watching DNews today. And if you're
Okay, and then this is just a 51-second video to tie it more into the environment. So in my class, and Jesse, I don't know how you did it, but I just did these two videos right after each other just to get the students thinking. Oh, of course, that didn't play. All right.
Cows burp and fart a lot, and it's impacting climate change. Each of Earth's 1.6 billion cows releases about 100 kilograms of methane every year. This might not sound like much, but methane's effect on the climate is 23 times more than carbon dioxide. Methane traps in the heat of the sun and makes the whole planet warmer. So each cow's emissions are about the same as burning 1,000 liters of petrol every year. Cows are mostly responsible for 18% of the total greenhouse gases worldwide. That's more than the entire transportation sector put together. There's good news though. Methane only lasts for about 10 years in the atmosphere, unlike CO2, which can stick around for hundreds of years. So if we can find a way to get cows to produce less methane, then we would see a faster drop in global greenhouse gases.
Okay, so I stop it there. Later when we introduce some alternative phenomenon, we go back and watch that video in its completion, because then it offers some alternatives to get the students thinking. So the next step in storylining is right after the students are introduced to this engaging phenomena, they start asking questions. And so in my class, even though we were in person, I went ahead and it was literally day 3 of class. So I think the students were still a little shy to really share out, they didn't want to embarrass themselves. So we started out just doing it digitally, had them each pick a color and start putting Post-it notes anywhere on this Jamboard, and I've linked the skeleton of the Jamboard in the CalFART document. So the students just, anything they can think of, anything they're curious about, they want to know, they think would be relevant, they put on a different Post-it note. And so then the challenge as the teacher then is to facilitate that as a conversation. So once everybody gets all their questions written down on there, I started to group them together as a conversation. Okay, so I'm seeing some questions about numbers of cows. So we created, does anybody else have one to add to cow population? And then different animals that might produce lots of gas. So we started adding those in that category. So the students helped come up with these categories. And what's super cool that I love about this is these topics, which is why it's called a driving question board, became the future investigations, because we're trying to solve those questions those students had. So it really did drive our activities. And we would constantly come back to the driving question board and say, okay, now that we've solved this one, like for instance, we know lots of different animals ruminate, well, and produce that methane. Now what do we need to figure out? Well, what's a ruminant? And so then that became the next research, the next investigation.
I teach a sophomore-ish level environmental science class. It's not AP. So Kelly and I have different, we are both able to use the storylines and modify it to fit our classrooms. So I did paper sticky notes like you see here, and I used something Noah and Robert talked about with building this culture in the classroom and having students really be in charge of leading the conversation. And I finally jumped into that, and I was shocked at just the different vibe that my classroom has had from this, and it's been wonderful, and it's more than I expected. So that's been great. So yeah, part of that is having a balance, right? Between student led, but then also don't be super silly and crazy. So some of our questions were a little ridiculous that I put in the left-hand corner there that we're not going to talk about. And they could ask anything. So there's a lot of questions about just cow characteristics in general. They had a lot of interesting things on there. And then things that I can use to get to where I want to as well would be, they have a lot of questions about methane. And then they had questions about what could happen to have, they had some ideas about certain things that would have cows producing less methane. And so where we started was we were just chatting, and there's so much about cows that my kids didn't know. And like our school is in a field, like we're not in a city or a town. It's in a field between two cities, and there are cows across the highway, like right there, right? Like they didn't know, nobody in this class knew about cows regurgitating and chewing cud. They did have some ideas about the 4-chamber stomach. They recognized that from the video and they remembered. It was just great. But one thing we talked about was, well, why are we talking about cows with methane instead of other animals? And one kid I was like, why would they be producing more? And one kid was like, maybe it has something to do with their 4-chambered stomachs. I was like, yes. So then we could go down that path, start on that path.
And so another stop along the lines of the storyline, just depending on which way your students take you of the benchmarks you want to accomplish. One of that is to model those stomach chambers. And so there's an activity on there where the students create a 3D model with structure and function. And so here I have 5 tables at my class, and I like small groups. So then I added the lower GI of the cow as the 5th. There's 4 chambers, and then I added the lower GI as a presentation. And then I have this interesting thing going on in my classroom because we're a veterinary class. A few years ago, I had some engineering and veterinary students that made a cow simulator for me. It's behind this gal over here in the burgundy shirt. And that's so that we could preg check, because we don't always have the opportunity to stick our hands in a cow's rectum to find out if they're pregnant or not. Not every semester is that available. So we went ahead and built a cow simulator, but it looked really plain with just the pelvis and the reproductive organs. So I wanted to have the students scale it to fit into my Big Bertha simulator. So we did have this small model, so the students had to all find their proportions of their particular chamber or GI tract on. They had to scale it from that. So that was crazy that math was a little difficult for them. And so at the end, this is what it looked like, although I need to get some plastic to kind of heave it up so it's in the right spot. But we have our 4 chambers, and then I really liked the stretchy hose as our small intestine, and then this red thing is the rectum, right on out the door.
I wanted to talk about this first before I talked about our 3D models, is from the storylining things and also having a summit learning curriculum last year. Modeling on paper has been amazing to gauge their understanding throughout, and also for them to see their learning, because a lot of times when my kids don't have a lot of worksheets and quizzes and tests, they don't think they're learning. So this has been great. These are their initial models of what's going on after we had our first conversation. So and it's great because some of them knew more than others. Like this one didn't really put a 4-chambered stomach in. This one did, but they don't really know what it looks like. This student knew like methane, and we also found out they Googled real fast that burps produce way more than farts. Sorry, I'm just gonna use those words. So just seeing what's going on, and then we're going to make a couple more models throughout and have a final model. Oh, and I like how this one included methane and greenhouse gases equals bad. So, and then if you want to go to the next one, Kelly. I loved making these models. because the 4 chambers have such unique structures for what their function is. So they did the outside, but then doing the inside of the chamber was amazing. So the reticulums here, this is the omasum, which is responsible for water absorption. So it has all these different really long fleshy layers, and I just love that structure and function part. I mean, look, okay. And also one student is like, well, why are we learning about cows? And I'm like, because it's fun. But really, we talked about what different systems there are, and that learning about systems and structure and function can help you understand other systems, like not even living systems.
So thinking about how digestion works in a cow and how the methane is produced, the students will realize that the big action, the big fermentation vat of the chambers is actually the rumen. And that's the first one listed as you learn about the 4 chambers. And so it reminded me of something I did early in my career. So I pulled this in as a wet lab about the opportunity to do a hay infusion, and all the instructions are written in our document. Basically, you just need to know that it costs like $7 to do the whole thing. You set it up about 2 weeks before. You get some Timothy hay, or if you have hay available to you, and pond water. And then I recommend the fish tank bubbler. Did you find the same thing? Yes. Since Jesse, you were doing this yesterday, did your not bubbler, was it teeming with protozoa?
Yesterday.
Oh, you didn't end up doing it yesterday. Okay, sorry, false alarm. So just for out of curiosity, my students wanted to know, well, okay, so the rumen, this is fermentation, so it's anaerobic, but yet I had one sitting there with a bubbler. So we started one then also that had no bubbler in it, no fish tank bubbler. And the students actually found out after, if you compared them right at the 2 weeks mark, the aerated one was the one that actually had the most protozoa for them to see. So that's just a little tip. I'll show you real quick what one of my students captured using their phone. Check out all the protozoa. Again, this was like no effort to set up. And also they just stuck it on a slide cover slip. They put just 1 drop from the hay infusion onto their slide, slapped a cover slip on. So that was really nice. And so one of the things that, oh, my windows are popping in front of each other. Stop. Okay. So one opportunity that wasn't available for the last 2 years because of COVID, but typically I take my students to K-State and they actually reach into the rumen. Our little stop is called Roman the Rumen, and that's with the livestock division at the K-State Vet School. And so in your document, I give you the opportunity for, if students are really interested, and some of mine, when the group that had the structure function of the rumen just kind of stumbled upon this, and they're like, why are there cows with holes in their stomach? And so it's actually a fistulated cow. The fistulation is the surgical procedure that makes a hole. And then they add a cannula, which is the rubber donut. And the kids are always shocked when they reach in because it's really, really warm. The plant matter is floating. It's called a lawn. And then they reach in through that matted lawn and they can feel the inside of the rumen, which is the papillae. So that's a really neat, but it was fascinating for my students to look up, what is that? And then I have a link to a 1-minute video where it shows a cow at K-State on K-State Open House that has the fistula, and they talk about that. There's another investigation, part 2 of hay infusion, if you're interested, to see if your protozoa is healthy enough and bacteria to digest methylene blue. The procedures linked in the document, but basically you just take a test tube of your hay infusion, which would be equivalent to the rumen juices, and add 3% methylene blue to it. It should be kind of a putrid, kind of that color, and then you add the blue, it becomes kind of bluish greenish, and in about 2 to 3 minutes it should those organisms, if they're healthy in there, should metabolize it back to the putrid color. So that's kind of neat as an option. Okay, so then Jesse's going to go ahead and put into the chat in a moment. She's going to put the link to the document, and then we'll make sure that this is accessible through the resources Drew will share out. But we have the entire document where it steps through in little chat. those little chat bubbles. It has recommendations about links to the routines of the storyline, just to remind you as you go through. There are tips and teaching tricks that I put in green, so you don't do some of the teaching fails that I did. And I do think it's important to note that that especially with the opening video, where it seems like cows are a villain, or any ruminants are villains in the climate change conversation, that it's important to say, there's so many different things going on causing greenhouse gases, causing climate change. So we're just going to look at one from an agriculture sector, digestion, fermentation. What are some things that can be done there to decrease what's going on? All right, Jesse, did you get that in the chat? Excellent. Okay. There you go.
Okay. So this is the pathway of the storyline. So this is the first part you kind of seen with the cows and ruminants. And then we go into methane fermentation. And then, I'm doing that with my cursor and I forgot people can't see it. Thanks, Kelly. And then that wet lab that you saw with the organisms that do fermentation. And Kelly has those really great videos of scientists explaining fistulated cows and other things. And then we go into like, why do we care about methane? Well, it's a greenhouse gas, and we can cover things like that. And in my class, I'm going to focus on different things than Kelly might focus on her class. So we're going to do a lot with methane and greenhouse gases. I'll do the rest, Kelly.
Yeah, so just depending on your class, like I think one thing that as the students then toward the conclusion of the storyline, I gave them the option of either doing a pitch to solve this problem of the methane and the environment and the output from the cows. And so some of them did supplements, some of them did biogas recovery, having net zero farms. It was really interesting how the students took that. And there's a bunch of starter ideas in the document. Or if students found something particularly interesting that they wanted to research instead of doing a pitch, I had these all independent projects that then they presented to the rest of the class. So like I had a student that really is hardcore on wanting veterinarian content. And so he did research on the RDA, which is a right displaced abomasum. So this disorder, what happens when there's too much gas in the abomasum and it floats above the rumen. I had a student that compared horses' guts, because ultimately it all ties back to all sorts of animals are herbivores. How do they reconcile getting nutrients out of the starch and fiber and those cellulose cell walls? So there's all sorts of ways you can take this. And so I had a student that then did the comparative anatomy of the horse. It was really fun to be able to do that. I think my students found more relevancy by taking it this way. And I gave them an assessment at the end where I left it very open-ended. So the feedback was they liked that they were researching things they were interested in instead of topics that I determined, but they didn't know that I had all kind of like tried to kind of formulate it ahead of time and have stuff kind of figured out on where they would take it. But from the students' perspective, they were all driving it, which was super cool. Another thing is that my students and I, these are the pigs that we raise as a class. We go out into the field and I say, okay, what are you looking at? And they all say cows. And I'm like, nope, they're not all cows. So it was cool to do this because by then some of them had run across, steer, bull, heifer. So I think it put a reality or a relevance, a frame of reference to a lot of the things that the students can learn about. So that's why I really enjoyed it. And the students, all of their feedback was, yeah, this was so much more fun than regular teaching. Jesse, tell us about your class.
Yeah, so I didn't teach bio this year for the first time ever. But I could also see using this in biology class. But I talked about a little bit why I loved it so much with the storyboard image, but just the whole culture around it has been fantastic. And also I love PBL and storylines because they get that real world connection. It's more, they understand why we learn certain things and also deeper understanding. So I just love it. And I've had a lot of fun with burp jokes, and it's just been, the structure and function stuff has been amazing. We usually don't get into that with digestive system and environmental science, but for this we were able to, which is cool.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kelly, for letting me be a part of it.
Yeah, this is super fun, and collaborating is always better. So if you guys do give this a run, feel free to add, send us an email. And if you have any feedback, things that you think should be added, we'll stick it in the document because it's a Google document, so it can constantly be evolving, and then list you in our acknowledgements. So thank you so much. And does anyone have any questions for us? And in the meanwhile, the puns are just so much fun. Like, and I would say cow puns, and the students couldn't quite read me since it was so early in the school year. So, and plus you have the mask on, so they don't know what to think. So they, you know, I'd say things like, okay, let's ruminate on this for a minute. And they'd kind of like, did she mean to say that? Or they couldn't figure me out. It was so much fun.
It was. On my first day of the unit, they came in and I played just a burping compilation video, but there were a lot of pauses in between. And like it started really low and then it got louder. It was really fun. Hated it.
Any questions for us?
Kelly, can you go back to like the progression through maybe?
Yeah. And there we go. This one?
Yeah.
Is that what you're thinking? Yeah, just all the different, depending on the class that you teach. This is what we came up with, and there's links to some of the activities. Something to think about is NGSS does not require that you learn about specifically what fermentation, more it was about processes and how molecules are broken down. And so if I was teaching this in a regular biology class, instead of anaerobic respiration the traditional way with lactic acid or alcoholic, this explains it so well in the context of what's going on in that stomach. I also like that the students in one of the activities, you know, how do they even make methane? After we did our hay infusion, the students then did research, and so some of them were looking at our grass versus grass versus beef cows. Is there a difference in methane output in dairy versus beef cattle? Is there a difference? And so that was really fun. And during that process, one group decided to research what bacteria are in there, because those are the methanogens, the archaean, as well as we have bacteria. And so that with the protozoa, they all play off each other with each other's byproducts. And so the students were like, and then some are gram positive and some are gram negative. And I said, do you know what that means? And they didn't know. And so I said, okay, I'm keeping your presentation. So when we do diagnostics using gram staining, I'm totally bringing that back up to put it into the reference. So it's cool that they've already nibbled away at some future topics we have. Any questions, thoughts? Cool. Well, thank you for listening to our cow farts, ruminating with us, chewing it over. So much fun. So thank you so much. And I think we're ready to wrap up the conference then. Oh, thank you, Kimberly.
Before I forget, I wanted to really thank Drew and Kelly Toole and Andrew Taylor also helped us a ton with the virtual conference. And thanks for everybody being patient as we were trying to kind of figure out how to change that up and stuff. Drew, do you have any parting words?
Not particularly. We'll get a recording of this uploaded to YouTube to watch kind of whenever. As documents become available, we'll make sure that we share those with you. The group itself is really active in a Facebook group. So if you're a Facebook user and you're not part of our KABT Facebook group, you can request to be a member and we'll approve that, so you can drop things in there. Again, the bio blog should be making a deserted comeback here relatively shortly. So make sure that let me share this with you. You you check out kabt.org for more information there. We've got some great kind of history of resources and labs and activities that have been shared by teachers. We hope to start that back up again now that we've got security issues squared away.
Thank you guys for organizing this. This was great. And I'm sure the part I wasn't there for was also great. So thank you.
Yeah, and we have this September. So come present, hang out. It's great. KABT is a great group of people that are supportive and inspiring. It's just
fantastic. Yep. Hopefully we'll have our field trip again in the spring this year, and we'll put out more information about that as we get closer, so we can go explore some stuff together.
Thank you.
Bye,
Y'all have a
everybody.
great rest of the weekend.
too.
Go fart around in your yard now. See y'all later.
Hi, everyone. This is great.
Good to see everybody. See everybody.